Hey, Lefko here, and this is going to be a special bonus episode of Afterglow. Probably not doing the 15-minute thing this go round. It's probably going to run a lot longer. You've already seen the title, and we've got a guest on. If you want to introduce yourself, plug your show, and we'll go from there.
Hey, Chris, thanks a lot, man. Scott from Retro Gaming Roundup. Um, our podcast has been around now since 2009. UK Mike and I, the other surviving co-founder, he and I created it coming out of Retro Gaming Radio back in like 2000, God, 2007 or no 2006. We started with that. So pretty much just myself. I've been a lifelong collector. I guess I was a retro gaming collector before it was called retro gaming, and got into the whole arcade and pinball thing too. And just this stuff's been a part of our life. We've had the good fortune to do some pretty amazing things, like running the expo we love, creating our own Atari game, sitting down with every one of the guys that designed the hardware and the software that we love. So we got a lot of interviews and all that. So once and only once you have listened to all of Chris's content, should you go over and listen to our stuff.
I,
But we got some cool stuff.
I cannot push Retro Gaming Roundup enough. They have a huge back catalog. They've got some amazing interviews with some of gaming's luminaries. Uh, Scott have his segment on the hardware flashback. He will go into some deep detail, and he keeps it interesting though. It's not a dry segment. It's something to where you'll always learn something, but at the same time you'll always be interested and want to listen in for more. They do a top 10 every episode. It's always hugely entertaining to listen to. There's news, there's interviews. They've got a former developer for Ocean that has a special segment every month. It's always highly entertaining to listen to. I cannot push it enough. If you enjoy my content at all, you'll enjoy Retro Gaming Roundup 10 times more. And I believe that is www.retrogamingroundup.com, correct?
That's us.
All right, awesome. So today, I wanted to get Scott on here because he grew up in the same era I did. He actually got in a little bit before me, but I want to talk about one of the granddaddies of gaming, the Atari 2600, which Scott not only grew up with this system, but later in life even helped to create a new game for this system, which is really cool.
It was. It was. And the thing for us growing up with that system is we didn't know what it was going to be. We didn't know. Hell, I mean, we didn't even know video games were going to be a lifelong thing. In fact, there was a reasonable, in hindsight, it seems not reasonable, but at the time, there was a reasonable suspicion that video games may have been a fad, a flash in the pan, a temporary technology, which sounds just crazy right now when you think about, what consoles are, what computers are. Um, and it at one point we thought, okay, that may be it. When the crash happened, and you went into a store and they simply said, you're like, hey, where's the video game aisle? Because it used to be over here. Oh, we don't sell those anymore. And you thought, oh well, I guess that's over. And it of course the Nintendo Revolution relaunched the whole industry, but it started a lot sooner than we think. Because for a lot of us that grew up, in that 70s 80s thing, um we didn't even know like the Odyssey existed because we were like three, and it came into our consciousness later that, oh, there were things before the Atari. And then once you get serious in the collecting, you're like, oh crap, there were things, a lot of cool things before the Atari. And that, in 72, the video game industry was largely born, but it was actually kind of dated back to 71 in a way. So what you had was, Computer Space and Odyssey were both like literally you had the first arcade game which nailed the formula. It was a, stand up, eye level monitor, waist height control panel, instructions, the name on a marquee that was lit, an attract mode where the game played itself idly, and sound. And none of that was necessarily guaranteed to be baked into the first arcade game. And then you get into the first console, the Odyssey, similar thing, but it none of these things ran software. They were logic machines. They didn't have any general purpose computer processing code. It was just logic, counters and gates, as Ted Dabney, the creator of computer space, always said. And yeah, man, like so by the time the Atari arrived, it was actually, second gen, and it was the first real generation of what's called, a general purpose computer, which means, it could run any code that was written for it that could fit within that memory space and, other qualifiers. But, it didn't only run narrow specified applications or solve one equation. It could run general code. And that's the era, that the Atari, in concert with the Channel F, which is largely forgotten. But in 77, that's what the whole thing was ushered in by.
And the Atari, honestly, in my opinion at least, it was amazing what developers got out of that thing. Especially if you look at the early game releases versus the late game releases, there is a stunning difference in what a developer could manage to squeeze out of that thing. Like even games that people crap on. Let's take ET, which I do not think is a bad game. I know I'm in the minority on that. I don't think ET is a bad game. I think it's misunderstood and people don't know how to play it. But graphically, that game, at least in my opinion, is amazing for being on the 2600 if you compare it to something like Combat.
And that's you make an interesting point there that kind of if you turn it, 90 degrees and look at it from a different angle, all systems dramatically differ in late production games from early production games. But it's kind of like that difference gets narrower and narrower as we go. If you look at like a first release PS4 game and a late release PS4 game, yeah, there's differences, but there's no more tricks to learn. When I say there's no more tricks to learn, you're not, tricking the hardware into doing something it can't do. You don't have access to the hardware. You may learn some additional tricks with the API, so that you can do one call faster than another if you do this or do that. But ultimately, you're not tricking the video card into like rewriting its memory twice in a cycle so you can do some, trick. That's not available anymore. So if you go backwards in video game history, it actually the difference between generations, the first launch games and the last launch games was much more dramatic. Like you look at back, say the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you look at the say Balloon Fight and Mario Brothers, the early games, and then you go look at Mario 3. Mario 3 looks like a Super Nintendo game. Huge gulf,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Atari, oh yeah, the Atari being before the Nintendo had an even bigger gulf. If you look at something like you know, Neubauer's games, Solaris, for example.
Hmm.
You look at a late release game like that, and you compare it to an early release game, that they're different systems. I mean, they are visually so different. And all those were hardware tricks, not so much software exploitation. Some of them were, but they learned how to squeeze every bit. So those differences in early release and late release were just so dramatic.
Not
But
only
one
that,
thing
but
about the Atari,
go ahead.
no, after you, sir, go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, like design, they completely nailed. Like we brought up like the Channel F earlier, but if you compare the controller for a Channel F versus the controller for an Atari, you got much more of that arcade feel out of that Atari controller.
Oh, by far. And there's two things about that sort of development cycle in an era that really stand out to me. That was the first time that, you know, like if we said, just general American slang, hey, I'm going to the fridge, can you grab me a Coke? It could mean a 7-Up, a Sprite, a Pepsi. It's a generic word for soda. And that is varies regionally. Some places it's a pop or so, but in general, like if your friend from elsewhere was there, even if your local region calls it a pop, and he says, "Hey, you got any Coke in the fridge?" You would know he meant soda, right?
Hmm.
And that's how it was with the Atari 2600. Is it even like at the time, like 82, I owned a ColecoVision. That was a system I got, and we would still say, "Hey, we're gonna go to my house and play Atari." Atari had become synonymous with video games even if you had a different system. And the other thing that, and this is kind of like a three-legged stool here, you got the cool part of, the Atari exploitation of how they figured out how to get more out of the hardware, how synonymous with video games that the Atari became. And then the other thing that I think is neat is how slow of a start compared to other systems that the Atari really got. I mean, so it came out 77 and it was not hit off the bat. It wasn't because, to the consumer, the technology underneath, they don't really care. So the early Atari games, their technology that let them play, say, Pong, was the visual impact was no different than Pong or the Odyssey that had come before. So you didn't see a dramatic difference. You saw kind of the same games that had just for a higher price point, right? And so you as a consumer did not care that that was a general purpose computer executing code compared to, just logic arrays. You just knew it cost more and did the same thing. But it had the potential, it had the capability to do so much more. And really it was Space Invaders that came around and that kind of gave it a bump. And then like 80, 81 hit, and that's when it really started to take off. So, it was almost, 5, 6 years into the Atari 2600's history before it really had its monstrous household name status that, it later had. So that to me, that's just kind of an interesting piece of its history.
Well, it was an amazingly long-lived system too, because everyone remembers the NES in its heyday, but you could still buy brand new in-box 2600 games in the store at the same time that you could buy NES games. Like I distinctly remember getting a copy of Atlantis, and they were dirt cheap at this point. I think it was during the I think they had re-released the 2600 along with the 7800, if I remember correctly. But
Oh yeah. Now, if you want to do this chronologically, um, I got to back up just a tad before you had mentioned when you reached out to me, you wanted to kind of talk about history and memories of it.
yeah,
For me, the Atari, like I said, I got an Apple II late 77. And I'm like, 6 years old, 5 years old. And, I just, I was asking for a soldering iron in kindergarten. It was just something about that I knew I wanted. And, to my parents' credit, they were pretty forward thinking about this stuff. And they weren't technologists, but they were like, hey, if our kid's asking for a computer and he actually knows what he's asking for and why, and he's not started first grade yet, let's look into this. So, when the Atari came along, I was certainly conscious of it. And, a lot of friends, more and more friends started getting Ataris. Their older brothers, they would have Ataris. And, so you grew up, even if like I did not yet have my own Atari, by 80, 81, you were awash in Atari. You even maybe had some Atari games if you didn't have an Atari. And it was just this, world of Atari surrounding you. So I did that. And then, 82, I got a ColecoVision. And a couple months later, I think it was that summer, I got my first, Atari 2600. And the Coleco was, superior in technology, but the Atari had such a library and such a social, you know, presence. It was, the rituals of like that era, like, we would meet up with our friends at the arcade, sure, yeah. And that Sunday we'd be at the skating rink, and that had a huge, huge arcade in it for, I grew up in a small, crappy town in Mississippi, and the skating rink had like 50 arcade games in there. So I got, Monday morning, you get on the bus, and, you would talk to your buddy, maybe Sunday, hey, let's trade some Atari games. And, you would bring your games, he would kind of bring his, and you go like, all right, so I'll trade you Galaxian for Defender, and you just swap games. Sometimes it was just, for a period of time, sometimes for good. And there was just such a social network and community around the system at that time. That when the Nintendo came along, of course, we were all older, junior high, high school, and you know, but even in that era, I had never gotten rid of the older stuff. And I had, it's funny enough, as we were, talking about doing this recording, I was looking at, the shelves, and at one point, I actually knew like my core like 12 games from like originally that I had with it. But over the years, and this kind of leads to something I want to mention when we talk about making games, is you sometimes lose track of things. So I don't know which kaboom. There's like three kabooms here, you know, like 12 stuff. I don't know which one was the original one anymore. And at one point I did, I knew which ones were my original games.
Hmm.
But so that gets us up to the point that you were talking about that I think is a really cool period in Atari history that we should talk about. And that's the Fun is Back campaign.
And
And that's the exact.
that's actually more or less the era that I got introduced to the system. At that point, I would have been maybe 5, 6 years old. I'd spent the summer at my uncle's house, and he had an NES. And at that time, the NES was fairly new. Games were a little pricey for it. He had like maybe 8 or 9 games for it, but he had an Atari that I played all the time. And again, I want to bring up that you had brought up the library. He probably had 50 or 60 games for the thing. So I'm like a kid in the candy store trying out all these games.
Oh yeah, I mean it was. And there was always like garage sales and friends, and so it wasn't hard to round up a pretty meaningful collection of Atari stuff. And there was a period. I mean, it's not like Pac-Man was created. Everybody loved it. The developers retired for life, never had to work again, and Pac-Man was a classic. At some point, the games that became the legendary icons of gaming that we now do podcasts about and collect and all that, they were just old games, and we didn't really care that much because when you walked in the arcade, it's like yeah, I already played Pac-Man. At some point, it was just Pac-Man. It was just a 3-year-old game that was kind of dingy. That's how we saw it at the time as kids. So when I walked in and I saw like Mike Tyson's Punch Out and Moonwalker and Ninja Turtles, that kind of stuff in the late 80s and early 90s. And it's got, bright colors and big monitor and stereo sound. And, you're walking down the hall and you hear, Moonwalker. And it's just this, whole graphical, something that you couldn't even do on a home computer unless you had like maybe an Amiga, maybe. That was a big deal. And the other games kind of looked old by comparison, and they kind of got shoeboxed or thrown out. But around the sort of the end of that era, the between the 5 to 6 years, you kind of needed to cool off on a game before you said, "Oh man, I hadn't played Pac-Man since the arcade days." That's when we started buying that stuff, and that's fortunately Atari had pretty well timed the Fun is Back campaign. So the Nintendo was out there. It was nice. It was expensive. And they thought that there was a market to clear out their warehouses full of old Atari 2600 stuff. So,
I
KB Toys and a couple of the other, toy stores, they launched, with Atari, they would host these, displays. So you would have like, you'd walk in, they'd have usually, the 2600 Junior, which was the same board, just in a different case. But you would walk in and they would have for $35, they would have the Atari 2600. And then all the games were between $1 and $5 each. So, as a teenager, you could walk in there and just go, one of these, 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 and leave there with 24 games and another Atari just because it looked new and different,
Yeah, like I cleaned up in that era just because, again, I can't remember the store we had gone to because, you know, age, but they had a ton of Atari games for $1, and I literally got a copy of every Atari game that was priced at $1 that they had on the shelf. I probably walked out of that store with 20 Atari games.
Oh, that's exactly what I did. And so those games also kind of ended up in boxes with other games. And then that for me, I guess if I had to ask myself when I became a retro gaming collector, that was when I became a retro gaming collector, because that was the first time I would say that I articulated to myself and maybe sometime to others that, you know, the older systems were still cool. And, I ended up, going into the Army, 91, and I was in the military, you do basic training, then you go to AIT, which is your school. Like, let's say you're infantry, you go out and you learn more infantry tactics, different weapons, all that kind of stuff. Let's say you're, a cook, you go off to Army school and learn how to cook, or whatever your job is. So I was a Patriot Missile Systems tech, and I ended up at Fort Gordon. So that's a very long school. Learning how to, operate, fire, operate as a crew member in the Patriot Missile System is a pretty technically complex task, And so our AIT was pretty long. So, I had, certainly the Nintendo that was still current. I mean, you could still, like, I think Super Mario Brothers 3 had just come out. You could still go buy Nintendos, you could buy, all that. And we were in these barracks, and we had a wall locker, and that was where you had to have like your uniforms and all that. And anything you could fit in that wall locker, you could have in there within reason. So one of my trips, home before I went back to base, because we were allowed, not every weekend, but some weekends we could leave. So I went back and I picked up my 19-inch XL100 RCA TV, my Atari 2600, and the box of games. So, as you go through the AIT, it kind of settles in, and, things calm down a bit, and, they're not watching you every second, and you're kind of there to train. So I would end up like, going to class, like, you have PT at like 5 a.m., then 6 a.m. breakfast, and then 7 a.m. you're marching to the school. So you're at the school, the Army's, schoolhouse. So you're in there like training on, radar or, inertial guidance, whatever. And then you break for lunch. So initially they'd like literally march through the chow hall in like phase one. Later they gave you a little more autonomy, and you just simply had to be back in an hour. Well, I would jet by the chow hall, kind of get something, real quick to go. And then I'd go back to the barracks and I'd sit there and play like Space Invaders during lunchtime, and like, a buddy of mine, he had a TurboGrafx 16, I think, that had just come out. But, it was fun, man. Like, when we were in that barracks room, like in evenings or weekends, my roommate and I, like, we'd sit there and play Atari, man. And it was like, oh, dude, I remember this game. This was great. So that was kind of, I guess, for me, when I began collecting the old stuff, right about the time it was about, 10 to 12 years old.
And for me, in my case, the Atari, don't get me wrong, I love the Nintendo. The NES is probably my favorite system of all time, but the Atari gave you gaming experiences that you could not find on the Nintendo that were still incredibly fun. Like, take something like Asteroids. You're not going to find anything like that on the NES. Take Breakout. Other than maybe Arkanoid, you're not going to find that on the NES. Qbert is another great example to where there was an NES port, but the feel of the Atari version, in my opinion, was superior to the NES version just because of the fact that the Atari, you had the stick with the directional controls, whereas the NES version, all you've got is the D-pad. Everything on Qbert's at an angle.
Yeah. And if you look at, like, say, the NES, and you look at, say, their port of Donkey Kong, right?
Hmm.
It was really, really good. But it was kind of poorly timed because I didn't really care. I mean, a lot of us didn't care because Donkey Kong to us at that point was just an old game.
Right.
And it was like, oh, Donkey Kong. Yeah, I know. I played it on Coleco like 5 years ago. It's 87. I want to play, you know, uh, Smash TV. I don't want to play, Donkey Kong. I already did that. It's just an old game, which, kind of, brings me to a point about the downside of Atari and what I really think, kind of hurt them from continuing as a legacy manufacturer. I think the thing that got them on the road of ruin, if you will, was that they simply through poor planning, through not being ready, through misreading the market. The famous, okay, we complete the 7800 and we put it in the warehouse for 3 years. The, of course, the famous Nintendo goes to Atari cap in hand and says, look, we don't think we can compete with you. So here's what we built. It's way ahead of what you got. Well, how about you guys sell it here? We all make money. Atari's like, hit that thing out of the office. Um, that the downside of Atari, because I mean nothing's perfect. Excuse me. And I have good and bad memories of Atari. When we say Atari, 2600, 700, 200. The name, the brand is ubiquitous. As much with its own hardware as it was with all of gaming. But we would the 2600 came out, and we had all played all those games, right? And here comes the Atari 5200. We were like, oh, new Atari. And, the Coleco's out, the Intellivision's out, and there's all these great systems. We say to ourselves, oh man, I want to check out this 5200. What does it do? And you look at it and like, excuse me, you look at the, like here, I just pulled down my Atari 2600 box off the wall, and I'm looking like there's a kid in a striped shirt screaming, holding the joystick, having a good time. There's the box art, like the guy playing tennis, the motorcycle racing, and all that. But then there's the screenshots, so you got like the ski jump and, you know, uh, battle zone and, all the just air sea battle, just all these great Atari titles. And, okay, so you get the 5200. And you're like, all right, what were the cool 2600 games, right? And you're like, okay, we got Pole Position, Battle Zone, Missile Command, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Pac-Man Jr., Frogger, Berserk, Asteroid Centipede. Okay, and you pick up the 5200. Okay, what games are out now? And it's like, okay, they've got Frogger, Pac-Man Jr., Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Missile Command, Battle Zone, Pole Position, Berserk, Asteroid Centipede. It's like this is the same shit that was on a 2600.
Yep.
And we didn't really know or care that, it was a better version, a better port. All we saw is the new Atari plays the same games as the old Atari.
Not only
And
that, but
once
in many cases,
finally,
it played them worse, in my opinion, just because of the hardware of the system. They might look a little prettier, but that controller is one of the worst controllers I have ever used.
yeah, that's you're not wrong there. But then like 7800 finally arrives to market. I never saw one in a store for sale. The only place I saw the 7800 was, if you ever bought comic books in that era, they would always have the ads for various things. Like that's where I saw the ads for the Vectrex was in comic books.
Hmm.
But there was an ad for the 7800. And I remember seeing that. And I remember in the Sears Wish book seeing a 7800 for sale. I never saw one in the stores in person. And even like, okay, right now I can reach up here and I've got my Atari 7800 box. I'm looking at the back of it. Devious Centipede, Asteroids, Joust, Miss Pac-Man, Pole Position. It's the same shit. And that was what I'm looking at Nintendo, right?
Hmm.
And I can go get this Nintendo and I've got Gyromite, Double Dragon 2, Space Shuttle, Super Mario 1 and 2, Operation Wolf, Heavy Barrel, Terminator, Blaster Master, Karate Champ, Dragon Warrior Defender, RC Pro Am, Zelda 1, Zelda 2. And I look at Atari and I've got Miss Pac-Man, Joust, Devious, Centipede. It's the same shit for 3 generations of consoles.
Yep,
And
and
yeah,
the
those
new stuff that
7800
they did
ports are
have got
good.
drowned by all those old games too. Like again, you bring up Joust, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede. For the few unique games that were on the 7800, a great example for me is Ninja Golf. Stupid premise, incredibly fun game, but you never heard about it because it's drowning under Galaga. It's drowning under Miss Pac-Man. It's drowning under Centipede.
Right. And even if, let's say, Atari brings to market a new system, but with arguably 5 to 8 year old games, out of date titles that people don't really care about. And as a kid, you don't have any loyalty to a brand. You don't feel you need to buy Atari or defend its legitimacy in the marketplace. You just want to play the games your friends are playing. So you and kids don't buy console, parents do, until you're like a late teenager. So you would go into the store, say hypothetically with your parents, or as a teenager with your precious lawn mowing and other money that you were able to get together enough to buy a console, and you're going to go in and buy something. Are you going to buy the system that plays the same games you were playing back in pre-middle school, or are you going to buy the thing that plays RC Pro Am and Legend of Zelda 2? There's
Yep.
not even there's no comparison. So today I love to do the tech, look backs and say, okay, could the 7800 have made games that were on par with the NES? And yeah, it really could. I mean, it was good hardware. What could have been? But man, not to rain on the parade too much, but it wasn't because they didn't. They released a slightly different console with the exact same games for the most part, or at least the same franchise. And you know what, man? It was Ninja Turtles or Pole Position 2.
And a lot
That
of that
that
was
to
your
me is
third-party
what sealed their
developers
fate.
too. It's like whenever you've got Nintendo and they've got everyone making their games, and you look at the list of what came out for the 7800, and under publisher, almost everything's Atari. Like every once in a while, you might have some random one come out from Activision or Absolute Entertainment in some cases, but for the most part, everything that came out for the 7800 was made in-house at Atari, whereas Nintendo had all these third-party publishers. It's just a rain of games. Oh, you burned out in Zelda? Try Battletoads. Oh, you burned out in Battletoads? Try RC Pro Am. But there's so much selection on that system. The same selection that was on the 2600 back in the day that they lost.
Yeah, and that it is unfortunate because often, like on our podcast, we give sometimes informally, sometimes we just formally, subconsciously say, well, this is what it is. We give extra credit or extra leeway to legacy manufacturers. So like when the PlayStation came along, I I was like, Sony, I don't want to buy a console from my VCR manufacturer. I want to buy, a console from Atari. I wanted those legacy manufacturers. I didn't like, ColecoVision and Television, all those guys that went away. I didn't want to see those guys go away. So one of the sort of the stunning disappointments of the, modern era of Atari, which is the companies that own the copyright of Atari and, pretend, I guess, to be Atari. Um, those guys, like when they released the VCS and they said, oh, it's going to be this new Atari. And I said at the time, okay, guys, you have a chance to do this right. You could, if you had a thought exercise and you said, all right, what if our challenge is this? What if the Atari business never went away? What if Atari had Nintendo's arc, right? What
Mm-hmm.
if Atari had released, say, the 7800 on time and then had fully, funded and properly executed, say, the Nintendo 10,000, right? And the Nintendo 10,000 was the equivalent of the Super Nintendo 2 years prior to the Super Nintendo, and it was like a peer, like in military terms, you have like a peer or near peer army, meaning something that can field the same weapons systems and the same numbers and the same competency of training and budget that you do. So, you know, that's what you would call a near peer force. So the same thing, like what if Atari had been a peer near peer to its competitors? And what if Atari never went away, right? So the thought exercise there that I thought that Atari rights holders had been presented with, that I would have been pushing on the show. I would have bought not one, not two, but 3 or 4 or 5. I would have bought them for Christmas presents. I would have bought them, and it's a whole other tangent. This is why piracy is not a threat. If you build a quality product, I don't care how many ROMs I have, I'm buying your stuff. But if Atari they had this golden opportunity, and if they approached it to like, all right, look, you got the PlayStation 4 or 5 out there. Look how it looks compared to PlayStation 1. You look at the Nintendo Switch, okay? Look how it looks compared to the NES. Let's do the same thing. What if Atari had never gone away? What if they had built out, an ecosystem, an online experience, a store, a social environment? What if they had done all of those things and then said, here you go. It's the Atari reimagined as if it had never gone away.
See,
Man,
I've had that
I would
thought
have gone
exercise
nuts.
before too. I kind of took it a different direction. My idea is what would have happened if Atari would have gotten the rights for the Commodore 64 instead of them doing their own thing. Like whenever you had your North American video game market crash, if Atari was sidestepped and gotten the rights for that Commodore, oh dear God.
Oh, sure. And I mean they have their own computer line. And that's the you actually, kind of stepped on a really important point there that is often underappreciated. Atari, we always, often forget they didn't want to be in the video game business. The casual Atari, fan or that's, sort of familiar with them, the hardcore, the guys that listen to this podcast going, yeah, of course we know that. Why are you even bringing it up? Well, not everybody does. That's the thing you got to remember when you do these shows is, not everybody knows every nuance, right?
Right.
So otherwise, what's the point in presenting information? But Atari did not want to stay in the video game business. They thought that was an unserious, limited, potentially transient fad. And that goes back to what I was saying about, we didn't know that these things were here for keeps. We thought video games may have been a fad. So Atari didn't want to be in the video game business. That's actually why they delayed the 7800 release. They wanted to be in the computer business. They wanted to be considered a serious manufacturer, not of children's toys, but of computers and information systems. So they tried to compete in that space. They had, of course, the ST was a near equivalent to the Amiga. It was very good, really good computer. And as late as the early 90s, there were still Atari computer stores. And Atari did have a market presence, and they just got rolled into non-existence by MS-DOS, as did everything,
Pretty
almost
well
even
everything
Macintosh.
else. Yeah,
And it was.
I felt like it was such a
There
shame
was that.
because
There was that.
I feel like Atari was one of those companies. They had so many opportunities, especially with the 2600. But even post that, they had so many opportunities to make so much more money than what they ended up making, to where they could have survived to this day if it weren't for the fact of a lot of the decisions they made. Of course, hindsight is 2020, obviously, but
Oh, yeah. And when I talk to Joe DeCure, who is one of their principal hardware designers, if you ever get a chance to interview him, don't ask him too many questions because basically he's a wonderful guy. He helped create a lot of hardware, but he has every PhD you've ever met. He is going to give you his thesis on rails, and anything you ask him that's a sidebar or extra, he's going to get right back on point and give you his thesis. It's just as soon as I talked to Joe, I said I'm willing to bet he's Dr. DeCuria because he's every PhD I've ever dealt with, and which is one of the reasons I never pursued that degree because I just don't like you know, that kind of work. It doesn't appeal to me.
right.
But brilliant man, the man necessary to make Atari hardware move forward. So he brought in like proper architecture. He emphasized, you know, good infrastructure, good architecture to allow them to grow. So when they were obsessed with, they wanted to make office technology. They felt that like that the kiddie toy video game affiliation was going to hold back their success. So they tried to slow roll and downplay video games while upping their computer presence. Well, they lost the gamble, and this is ultimately, it's true. It happened. Okay, Atari screwed themselves right out of the business. They made themselves increasingly less relevant by having less relevant hardware, less relevant software titles. They slow rolled, downplayed their video game branch to attempt to elevate their serious name and serious technology, and it worked. They talked themselves right out of video games, and and they didn't exist. Unfortunately, as computers evolved, again, it's hindsight, um, MS-DOS just became dominant in the business world. The IBM PC standard became dominant. And there's a neat, I can't give one guy credit for this because there's a number of people out there who've done the same show. And there's a number of YouTube videos out there you can find. Just search OS use by year, and it'll start with 1970, and you'll see various little things just kind of peak and drop off, and then you'll see CPM, control program for microprocessor, which was a disk operating system prior to MS-DOS, and you'll see it's 98%. You'll see MS-DOS kind of bumping around version 1, version 2.2, 2.3, and then you'll see Amiga, Commodore OS, and all these bars are each month they pretty much do one update of the graph a month, and you see all these OSs bubbling and boiling, and then all of a sudden you see MS-DOS take off on a hard line to the right, and everything else falls behind. Mac gets down in the corner, Commodore, CPM disappear, and all of a sudden, here comes Windows, and everything, and you see Linux pop up, and Mac OS is down in the corner. But yeah, Atari just didn't make it. Their computer division was in the end, a failure. I mean, look, dude, this is the hardware. A generic PC of 1992, just a beige box running a 386 or 46 and whatever, is never going to have the beauty, personality, and appeal of that Atari ST. It's
Right.
not.
Now, one
But
quick
ultimately,
question. One quick question I got for
yes,
you.
sir.
Going to the Atari computers, I know I'm veering a little bit off from the 2600, but legend had it that a lot of people from Atari left whenever they made Amiga, and then Commodore kind of came in under them and paid off the loan, and that's how Commodore ended up with Amiga. But if Amiga had stayed with Atari, do you think that we could actually see either one of them still around today in some fashion?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure. And it's kind of funny with Amiga because really the fans were hardcore, right? And the hardware was capable. The problem is they just went static on certain technologies because they were effectively frozen out of the business market, right? IBM just simply dominated the business market, right? So if David Pleasance, he was the guy, like the Bill Gates of, Bill Gates is to say Microsoft, Pleasance was to Commodore in Europe. So like I mean, Commodore is an American brand, but I think of Commodore as being American as, Mom, apple pie, and the M16. But, to the Germans and to the Brits, they almost barely acknowledge that the Commodore is even American. They're like, oh, that's our system, man. Did you guys have that over there in America at all? And, with the Amiga, they're not half wrong in that assumption.
Right.
But, I can sit there, we were just, over there in Blackpool in the UK doing an expo, and I can sit there and talk to, Butler and Pleasance and all, and, to them, they almost didn't see that in coming. They were kind of surprised. Um, but I remember towards the end of the Amiga, we were like, hey, there's no CD-ROMs. Whereas you could go into the store and buy not only a CD-ROM drive, but that was the dominant method for software distribution. So everything started to look and feel dated. The PCs, they had CD-ROMs and, 16 megabytes of memory. And then they had Windows 95 and CD-ROM support. And you were watching Weezer, play music on your Windows 95 install. And here's the Amiga. Maybe next year we might have a CD drive.
It's
And
such a shame how they
it
dropped the
couldn't
ball on
sustain.
that because if you go back just a few years prior, the Amiga was a monster compared to anything DOS or Windows 3.1 could put out. Like, it was a monster. And then just after a few years' time, they fell so far behind.
Yeah, and a lot of people lost that gamble. If you look at Apple, right? Apple thought, okay, let's take the slow road, kind of like the commies do. Let's take the slow road through the institutions. We'll take over the institutions and then we'll set the policy, right? So, rather than trying to create a revolution in the street, let's create one in, wherever. And that was Apple's philosophy, which maybe kind of goes back to their kind of, I don't know, hippie heritage with Jobs and all. But they looked at it and they were very pragmatic and very focused in their execution. They said people will use what they grew up with. So they went into the school systems, and even though their computers were some of the most expensive, somehow they got those apples into almost every school system. So, people grew up on Apple. Apple to them was the computer. And they thought, well, what are they going to buy when they go to college? What are they going to buy in the workplace? What are they going to suggest be purchased when they are in a decision maker role 10 years down the road out of college and, in their careers?
They've been
And
indoctrinated into the Mac already.
Oh yeah, and you need no further host proof of that than listen to my co-host Mark for more than 2 seconds. He's like, "Ah, yeah, Macintosh is the only computer ever existed," and he's a true believer, right? Like he has all Mac stuff, and he has his reasons for liking it, and he's not wrong. I stepped away from the whole smartphone thing when they evolved from I am buying a phone to send messages and make calls to look, you don't really own this. We'll intrude on it anytime we want. You just pay us full price for the privilege of carrying around our product that we still are going to mess with. And we're going to watch every fucking thing you do. And I'm like, bro, that's not the relationship we have.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
out,
I'm right there with you
So,
on that. Anything that has a locked bootloader just drives me up the wall whenever it comes to cell phones.
yeah, I mean, like the example, and I realize this is like super tangent, but this is how we roll. Um, if you bought, say, a Dell computer, right? And you formatted the hard drive and you load Linux, right? And you paid $2,000 for this Dell, and that night, you go to bed and you hear something downstairs, so you head downstairs and you're expecting to see the cat knocking something over, and there's this dude in his underwear looking through your photos, and you're like, "Who the fuck are you?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm Ted Dell. You bought a computer from me today, so I'm just looking through your photos and checking your emails." And it's like, bro, we don't have that relationship.
Right?
You don't do that. And we would say, I never agreed to that. Well, as much as believe me, you can tell I'm not on that side. We did agree to that. When we clicked yes on that EULA, we literally said that's the relationship we're going to have. So, me, I'm going over, Calyx. That's my daily drivers, Calyx. I have Linux phones. I got like 5 different variants of them. Some successful, some not. That's the direction I'm going in, not their direction.
Yeah, I'm a big
But
fan of stuff like
app,
the Pine phone.
yeah, I mean that's one of the I got a Pine Phone Pro, right here within arm's reach. But that was one of the things that I will say about Apple, as much as I don't like them or Google, and I bounce from either paradigm. Obviously, I had a lot of iPhones. I had from like the iPhone 1 to the iPhone, I think 12 was the last one I had.
Hmm.
And I can say this, the way I would explain Apple products to other people is they don't do everything the others do. Like Apple iPhones do not do everything that Droid does. Apple phones and Apple products don't give you full access to the thing that you paid money for. And then they start having access themselves. Okay, well, we're done. But the thing I will absolutely give Apple credit for is whatever it does, it does the same time right almost every time. And that has a huge effect. So, Apple, I mean, they had some rough years, man. Like they almost went out of business. And they brought jobs back. He brought back the next technology. He brought them up to the modern age. They released the iMac, which was an aesthetic hit that really was always Apple strong. I mean, I got a Mac SE here that you start to look at that, its thermal management, the quality of all the parts fitment and all. That Apple was doing that from the beginning, man. The Macintosh is way superior to most of its peers in terms of build quality and function. But in the end, all the extra window dressing, those expensive things, it's still just the same chips that's in another computer. And is it really worth an extra $1,000 to do the exact same thing? Well, that answer increasingly became no, and they ran into some trouble. But they are better than most at producing a diehard loyal following. And I think today they are, arguably one of the highest valued tech companies. I won't buy their shit, but I own their stock, that's for sure. And yeah, the what if. What if Atari had been as forward thinking, as savvy, and in some ways, as much as I would consider Apple to be a very arrogant company, they had a humility that in the early days that let them, take a step back, lose some money, just to build that fidelity with their consumers. And yeah, Atari could have done all those things, but they didn't.
Yeah, I've never been the biggest Apple fan, but it's bad these days because I see every other company doing it. Like a good example for me is internal storage. I'm here like if I can buy a 2 terabyte NVMe right now for $70, why is it that for your computer or phone or whatever has the storage built in, if I go from 128 gigabyte to 256, you're upcharging me almost $150? It's insane.
Because you paid it.
Yeah, pretty well. It's because the mass market's willing to pay it. It's a horrible situation. Although I will say, trying to steer it back a little bit back to the Atari, the Apple stuff is so rock solid, but it's so walled down that you could never see on an Apple device what you saw on the Atari, where the developers can like just go bare metal on that thing and double or triple the performance.
Oh, no question, man, no question. And, that was one of the things that made that system so beloved is what they were able to squeeze out of it as it aged. And, for some people, the Atari, went away and then came back. For some of us, it never went away. But, like if you look at, the whole Classic Gaming Expo crowd, the guys, those of us that for 2 decades ran out to Vegas every year, pretty much, for Classic Gaming Expo. It began as World of Atari when Atari was still in business, right?
Hmm.
So that kind of crowd, the World of Atari crowd, the CGE crowd, the kind of guy that in 91 had his Atari in his wall locker in the army. For those of us, the Atari never went away. For a lot of people, it did, and then it came back, and that's kind of the neat part of it. Is we generally kind of divide the Atari into two eras. There is the production era, like basically while the thing was being manufactured, and corporations were releasing the games and they were sold through retail. We consider that kind of be the official Atari era, right? Then it went off the market, the company stopped making games, and the stores stopped selling them. So then every game made after that we kind of refer to as the homebrew era, right? Now the homebrew could be something that a guy coded in his bedroom, or it could be a company that's trying to make new games for classic systems that very seriously wants to position itself as you know a company that makes games, and they don't want to be called homebrew. Okay, fine. It's a convenient label to delineate 2 points in its life cycle. So as the Atari started to see attention again, I would say this was around 2004, 2005. You started to see cartridges like the very first multi-cart. So you could load different ROMs onto the same basic hardware. And this was kind of a re-implementation of some existing ideas. Like the Starfast Supercharger, where you could install different games on, copy them onto the cartridge and then play the game. So, the same, it's just a storage device, and the code could be different games. So you start to see that, and then the resurgence of interest in Atari stuff. And then we started going to expos, and I remember, man, it was around 2005, 2004, somewhere in there. I started to see, oh, hey, man, there's going to be a new multi-cart that you can hook up to the computer through USB, and you can copy over, 21 different games. Or then it was 130 games, and then 200 games, and then finally now it's, like the Harmony, where you stick an SD card in there with every ROM, commercial, homebrew, anything ever, and it all fits on one SD, and almost all of them run
And
flawlessly.
it's amazing to
But
think about because the technology in the Harmony is actually more powerful than what's in the 2600 itself just to manage the file system. It's really crazy.
oh, I mean, yeah, big time, big time. Um, but it was that era, and okay, you think about 5 years in your life, okay? So 5 years ago wasn't all that long ago. You can remember what you're doing. Maybe you still have the same TV or computer you bought that year. You know, so here we are seeing these games, and then people start releasing homebrews in larger numbers, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not a developer. I'm not a coder. I never have been. I never will be. And I madly respect those skills and that creativity and the ability to sort of turn your idea into an actual result. Okay. And I've always said it like, the gaming expos and stuff. Um, you know, I'm never going to go win. Like, I could enter any gaming competition, and the only thing I'm going to do is lose. I'm not good at video games. I'm mediocre at best. I'm average at best. I'm just not. I'm not. I'm not killing it.
Oh, it's same
So
here.
I
I
have.
don't play because I'm good. I play because it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and you know, I really like the hardware and the tech. But when we started getting into doing the podcast, 2009, and we didn't ever sit down and say to ourselves, "Hey, we should make an Atari game. That would be cool." And you know, even just because until you do something, sometimes you would never have thought of doing it or that you could. And I think back to like when we were the dopey kids, sitting there with that wood grain, front end staring us in the face, and the Galaxian cartridge hanging out of the slot. The idea of one day, holding in your hand and making your own Atari physical cartridge was just unimaginable. So, well, hence you didn't imagine it. So that was what it was like for us. We had never articulated, hey, we could. And you look at all these, small independent developers started making all these new 2600 games. And some of them at first it was just like, okay, I can code. Let me whack together something that works. Like, back when sort of memes first moved, to the web and all. Um, a guy did one called Failboat, right?
Hmm.
And Failboat was 2014 by Peter G. I've got it right here in my hands. And that was a good example of like, okay, I can make a homebrew. And then you start having people making recreations of older games and ports of games that were never ported.
Hmm.
But so that era was just like exploding with all these new games, and I bought so many of them, man. Going to CGE every year, it would just be a race through all the exhibitor stalls to see what the new games were and get a copy of each. Because some of them there weren't that many copies made. It was, oh yeah, I'm gonna make 30 copies to sell because it was just one guy that made 30 copies to sell, and that's all he had.
Yep, I
So
never had the opportunity to go to the CGE or the EGC conventions, but I did get a few of the homebrew cartridges. I'm a huge Halo guy, so whenever Halo 2600 came out, I'm here like I've got to get that on the cartridge. Of course, whenever
Oh,
CGE
I could tell you
Adventures came
stories about
out,
that.
when CGE Adventures came
Oh, yeah.
out, had to buy a copy of that one.
So funny enough, that was one of the ones that really kind of got the gears grinding. It, man, this is maybe achievable. So, when Halo 2600 came out, we were talking with Ed about it, and he was pretty straightforward. He was like, "Yeah, so basically, I kind of retired early from Atari. I got a lot of money, and I was sitting around thinking what I could do. And I was bored one day, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to make Halo on the 2600." So, being a former, guru at Microsoft, he had he could text the guy and go, "Hey, can you ask legal if I can make Halo without being bothered?" And Microsoft's like, "Oh yeah, it's cool, bro." And then he does. But the idea that he devolved that game perfectly. You look at that image and that's Master Chief. I'm not even a big Halo player, and I look at an instant recognition, and that right there is hugely important, instant recognition. So, you know, in this era of all these possibilities and all these new games coming about, we were, if you want to hear the whole story, we got it on the podcast. We told it a million times, but the short version of it, if there is one, is we had just come back from we're doing a CGE, and I've got a game from that. It's a very special game. It's called Road Duel, and it was done by a fellow named Steven Smith. And he's gone to back here. He said to my friend Scott, drive on, Steven. Now, Steven was a very interesting guy. I don't know his exact medical history because we never discussed it. But he didn't live long. He passed away, years ago. He had all sorts of birth defect issues, like whether it was progressive. It was obviously progressive defects whatever he had. And the guy, I mean, like his eyes were rolled back, so all like you could really see is like the whites of his eyes and the little people looking down. And he had this huge crutch he had to use before he was just confined to a wheelchair. And I mean, you could not be in a room with this dude and not see that he was there. I mean, it was, he stood out because of all of his issues. And, he would always be there at the expo. And for him, that was his trip of the year. That was like, because he had to have some assisted care stuff. And, so that was his biggie. And the guy, like, he's legally blind. He had glasses like Bubbles from Trailer Park Boys. I mean, this dude, you know, but with all that, he loved video games and he just wanted to create his own game. So he set about learning code, and he was a exceptionally brilliant person. Like Stephen Hawking. Like if you think of Stephen Hawking, if you're in a room with Stephen Hawking, you would know he was there because he's that guy that can't speak who's in a wheelchair. And you look at his body of work and you realize, all right, this man's a genius, and it's the same guy. So uh he just he had done this incredible game and could barely see the results of his work. And he was sitting there, man. He was sitting over at Good Deal Games with Michael Thomason, sort of sharing his booth, and he's selling the copies of his game. And I had never seen somebody was so rightfully proud of their accomplishment, and he couldn't wait to find a copy. And and he told me at the time, we were sitting there, and I ran into him in the food court there in the Riviera, and he says to me, hey, I can't believe I'm here, and that like at one point, I'm sitting there on the carpet with a 2600 joystick in my hand, and here I am today as a publisher selling Atari games that I made. And I was like, dude, I don't know if I'll ever have that feeling, man. Good on you. And so later, we're at Class Gaming Expo, and this dude who I don't know, he's got a whole history. He was basically a known jerk. Like he would go around and he got caught. Like, multiple vendors said this guy stole stuff from us, and multiple exhibitors said, yeah, he just like picked up his disk drive and dropped it and then like sprinted away. but nobody would ever do anything about it. So one day we're sitting there, the expo's done, and they're breaking down all the tables and chairs. And Keith Robinson, who had inherited by buying the Intellivision world, was like Mr. Intellivision, right? Another wonderful guy that passed away way too soon, man. But
Yeah, absolutely.
he he and I, we were sitting there talking. It was me and Mike and him and all. And he kind of looks over, we hear this rustling, whatever, but we continue talking. And we get done. And what had happened is this known thief had come up, and we would burn, like, say, it's antiquated now, but at the time it made sense. We would burn like, like 1,000 CDs. That would be like, because if you give somebody a business card or a sticker, they get home, and even if they meant to, they probably throw it in a drawer, they probably throw it away, and they don't ever follow up. But we said, well, let's give people a CD that has a bunch of our shows on it. And as they're driving back home from CGE, or, people at that time still had Discmans and shit.
Hmm.
So you would say, hey, throw this in your thing and give us a listen.
So
So it was kind
it
of like
was
a
a
business
genius
card that you could
idea.
actually, yeah, I mean, it was like something we tried. And, it worked in that context of the era. So, we are sitting there, and this guy who was deaf, and dude, my own wife, she wears hearing aids. She lost her hearing. Okay, you know, we all know somebody's deaf. It doesn't mean he isn't. Like, it doesn't make him immune from criticism, or that he isn't, what he is. Right.
Right.
So two things can be true. So he stole 1,000 audio CDs. Like, literally picked them up and ran the fuck out the door as if it was, you know, a brand new video game system sitting there. And we're like, this idiot. He literally stole 1,000 audio CDs that he can't hear.
And
And
for the
it just
people
begged the
listening,
question.
right now, I have to say this story became legend on the old Retro Gaming Roundup forum, which eventually moved over to Discord. But this story is absolutely legendary about this guy who's deaf just swiping a bunch of CDs. Not one, which are free anyway, so he could have just grabbed one. But he takes the
It's
entire spindle.
1,000.
uh, there's no reason to steal them. You're not going to be able to sell the things. It was just
Yeah,
unreal.
it defied any and all logic, right? So initially, we went to lay a beating on the guy. So we were walking up and down the hallways there because it was Sunday evening, and we're hoping to run into this guy, and we were going to go out back and play basketball with him, and we never found him. Okay, we never found him. And so, we end up like, all right, piss on this. Let's go back upstairs. So, we go upstairs, and, we go back to the suite, and, like, we turn on the hot tub water, and, empty the lotion bottles and stick in our feet. And, that was back in our drinking days. So, we got like this giant bottle of whiskey that we're just passing around and just getting hammered, and, soaking our aching feet, and, relaxing. Expos are exhausting.
Hmm.
And one of us said, "Man, that'd make a cool premise for a video game. Like, you play us trying to chase down this CD thief and all that." And somebody else said, "Hey, wouldn't it be kind of cool if we did it like the other way, like where we're like the ghost monsters?" And because we didn't know what the game was going to be, we didn't know if we were just going to copy Pac-Man. We didn't know. We didn't even have a plan to do a game. And somebody just said, let's invert it. So we're like, the automated monsters. And then you're the CD thief, right? And you've got to get our CDs and escape. And then I remember saying, oh, yeah, and it's got to be like, you have to do the levels to reflect CGE. So we need, like, the arcade, the museum, the casino, the Vegas Strip. We need all these features in there. And, so we said, okay, let's do that. Let's make that a thing. And we started getting back, we started talking to people, and the fellow, I've got his game right here. At the time, Todd Holcomb had just done Evil Magician Returns, and I've got it right here. It says, oh yeah, he's got a note in it to me here. So he had done Evil Magician Returns, and he gave us a lot of great ideas. He talked to us about how he did it. He told us how he did like the map and the manual, and then the case. He used a CD case. So, when DVDs and CDs were, like say 10, 15 years ago, were more prevalent, you would have like a company might want to do a series of training DVDs. Like, when you start your company, if they said, okay, hey, look, we got, 4 training videos that used to be on VHS, but now they're on DVD. So they would put like those 5 or 6 DVDs inside this box. And the thing that Todd noticed is, well, an Atari cartridge fits perfectly in the circle, and then you close it, and there's actually a clip in there for the manual and everything else. So we said to Todd, well, hey, man, since you actually like know how to code, are you interested in working with us? And he said, yeah, that'd be kind of really cool, man, to be part of the podcast making a game. I said, yeah, let's do it. So, we started to add, he said, well, I know this guy that can do this. So the team started expanding, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but I will. I'll screw it up. But I said, okay, I'm just not a coder, man. What can I do? And I said, okay, well, I'll do, physical assembly, getting the boards with the code on them, the chip on the code on the chip, get that into the case, get the label on, get it in the box, print the manuals. I'll do the production. I could easily do that, right? And SoCal was like, okay, well, I'll write the manual and I'll do the art and all that. And UK Mike was like, okay, well, then I'll do the box and the a couple other things. And then as we started actually doing this thing, started, like a chat, and we all started pitching in our ideas and how we were going to do it. Um, I said, well, you know what? I really been reading up on this level design, and I'll send you this picture when we get done here. Um, of how you did the layouts of like a level in an Atari game, and you actually use graph paper. So I bought the engineering graph paper that's 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch squares,
Hmm.
and each one represents a pixel on the Atari screen. So, I apologize, I forget the exact number, but I'm holding here in my hands the map. So what we did is we had to draw out the hallway, and we thought, okay, so what are we going to be doing? Well, he's going to be running with us chasing him. What do you run through and have somebody chase you? Well, a maze, right? So how do we make a maze? So we thought about like the layout of the expo floor. So we actually went and got maps and photos to make a map of the expo. So like there were pictures that people had taken and posted of like looking down at the floor with all the vendors. And I kind of looked at all the tables, and I said, well, guys, I'll do level design because I think I can do this. So what you do is you take the graph paper that has exact number of pixels horizontally and vertically, and you draw out. So let's say we know the character is going to be 8 pixels, right?
Hmm.
If we make the hallway 8 pixels, getting into that hallway is going to be very difficult. If we make it 20 pixels, you run at that hallway from any angle and you're headed down that hallway. So scaling the character right to the scenery is actually a way of controlling game pace, difficulty, and other things. So I started taking like, you go to any like Comic Con, any local expo, anything you've ever been to, there's a layout of like tables and vendors and stuff. We thought, okay, well, we'll just put a pole here, like there's a support column. We'll put a barrier here. And then so you run in between the vendors thing out behind where the vendors are, and then pop and so we made a maze. So now we had a maze. We had, you know, the the 3 of us, myself and Mike James and SoCal at the time, we were the characters. So, we were running around trying to take your objects, trying to get our CDs back, and you were the deaf CD thief who you were trying to get. First of all, you had to reach the CDs, you had to steal them, and then you had to get past In Television the Great, which was our friend. You know, we asked, we said, "Hey, man, Keith, will you be in our game?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure." Oh, and you get to be the boss monster kind. He goes, "Oh yeah, I love that." Against Atari, I really love that. So we put Keith Robinson is In Television the Great. And we just kept going and going, and then uh, Pac-Man Red, Revenge, a couple of those guys on the Atari forum had various, sort of modules that they've been working on, like the ability to scroll graphics in a really novel way. So they came in and helped us out, and they did like, the title screen where you see the flashing Vegas sign actually like flashes. I mean that whole sign was more content than maybe what was in some games back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. Um, and as I recall, we took something like 32 megabytes. Because at one point I just did a right click properties, stupid simple shotgun count, and said there's 31 megabytes of assets, be it code, be it drawings, scenery. There's 31 megabytes in this thing, and we're gonna squeeze this down to like 31 kilobytes. Holy crap! And we did, But just that whole dev process, man, and it we had targeted about a year, and we were right. I mean, it came out to be a year. So 1 year later, right as CGE was coming around again, we had the manual done. And the manual, it looks so slick. The game was working, and we were ready to go. So we one thing we did is we asked a lot of the other game makers, hey, how many do we make? Because we had no idea. So we just went around at the expo and just sat down in their booth with them and said, hey, bro, we're doing a game. How many do we make? How do you know? And we got all sorts of answers. Excuse me, all kinds of answers. Anything from 25, 30 we made, 200 is a runaway hit. And I honestly, and one of the things I always wondered, just to tell on us, to tell on myself, is how any of this stuff gets lost to history. Like, how do you not know how many, of like how many computer spaces there were? Does Ted Dabney legitimately not remember how many they made there? Because he was there every day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I now understand that process. I really do, because I ordered all the cartridge shells from Atari Age. You know, they came, we used them. I didn't save those receipts for posterity in my email. Once I got the cartridges, it was like, like you don't have a record of every you order from anybody just for posterity. So I don't remember. Like, I know it was like right I-300s. Like, we were told 200s a runaway hit, and we sold almost 400.
Well, you
So,
also had a bunch of extra
okay,
stuff
cool.
in there too. It wasn't just a manual game and case.
Oh, no, we see, this is the cool part of having like this whole team and this, team effort of everybody bringing cool ideas, is we started talking about this, and we said, well, all right, look, hold on. We've made, we've gone through all the effort. We've made all this trouble to make, sorry, to make our own Atari 2600 game, right? And okay, it's in the box. That's going to be cool. But, and as much of a thieving, family screwing, money stealing, industry defrauding scumbag as Mike Kennedy became, um, at the time he wasn't that guy yet. And I have to. It would be dishonest to not include his contributions. He at that time was one of the guys that had a lot of the cool ideas of like, hey, but think about it, like games back in the day, they had all these other things, like they had a theme song that was on the radio. They had a breakfast cereal, a pasta, right? And yeah, I had more than a few bowls of Pac-Man pasta in my day. So we got to talking about that. We're like, all right, let's do it. So one of our dear friends, Adrian Killens, 80, also known as Shady 80, and he has a band called the British IBM, and they do mainly video game and computer themed kind of songs. So Shady 80 and his band of shysters, they said, hey, we'd love to do a song. And we said, that's great. Sounds good. Knock yourself out. And he said, well, what do you want it to be? I remember I said to him, dude, look, I can't, I'm not a musician, So I wouldn't presume to tell you like, hey, make this for me as I imagine it. And he's a hell of a musician, so I didn't want to insult, him by asking him to do something I couldn't do. They said, no, like, what are you thinking? I said, well, what I'm thinking is all the classic games like Pac-Man Fever basically describe the gameplay. And then you had like, say, if you look at the old Scooby-Doo episodes, right? There was always that chase, scene where they had some sort of bubblegum pop, funky song. Like I saw one the other day, like Scooby-Doo's running around and it's the song "I'm in Love with an Ostrich," right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like this, and I said, so 80, if I had to tell you like what I'm imagining in my mind's eye, it's a Scooby-Doo chase song that describes the gameplay. And he goes, okay. So a couple weeks later, he comes back and says, see what you think of this. He did us a theme song that sounds like a Scooby-Doo chase song. I mean, it could not be better, right? And then we did, Mark Kaminsky, one of our show associates, he hugely contributed some art assets, some drawings. And we made like literally, we went and got like, Kraft macaroni and cheese, but we had like this wrapper that went around it that was like, CGE Adventures. So we had the theme song, the breakfast cereal, the pasta, just everything. And it was so cool to do all the accoutrements that a game had back in the day. The feelies. Like I remember I bought an edition of Ultima, and it had like a silk map in it and a coin. And we said, well, let's put in some dice because it's Vegas. Let's put in like one of the physical items in the game. One of the items you have to have is an access badge. So we said, well, let's make a physical access badge that, you can have. So we did all those things,
And to me,
So
that part
whenever
was
we said,
genius too, because it gets you in the mindset for the game. Whenever you open that box, and you've got like the dice representing your casino, you've got the VIP badge representing the convention. Like it gets you in that mindset to play this.
well, yeah, and that was, you look back at early video games, the the graphics were sort of a placeholder for your imagination. Like, look, and that's not a bad thing. Like, look at the original Dungeons and Dragons, right? All the pencils, the papers, the tables, the numbers, action took place in your imagination. Maybe at the top end of it, you had a figurine that represented, a barbarian with an axe,
For the most
but it
part, it
was
was all
all a game
theater of the
of
mind. Yep.
imagination. Exactly, theater of the mind. And that's the kind of thing that it was that. It was exactly that. So we said to ourselves, all right, so in the era of Atari, you know, and the whole golden era of video games, the graphic was the stand-in for your imagination, right? Well, with all the modern, drawing tools and everything else, we could do it a little more actual graphics. But still, when you bought that thing like that coin, that was the physical representation, of what was being represented on the screen. So it all kind of fed on itself. So that's how we ended up like the reason we ended up with a pasta and a breakfast cereal and a song and all that was because we just said, dude, if we're gonna make like, I mean, how many times in your life are you gonna do this? If we're gonna do a 2600 game, let's like do the whole damn thing with no apologies and no half-assing it. And we did. And dude, trust me, there's nothing special about us. Like the development team, half of us had never coded a thing in our lives. Um, but we each had some sort of talent, And if you ever said to yourself, hey, it would be, cool if we could make our own game, but I just don't know that much about it. Well, there's probably a group of people that you can circle up together that do want to bring something like that into fruition. So, the takeaway, I would give to any of your listeners is if you want to, wake up one day and say, what would be cool? I do want to make my own 2600 game. I want to do that. Do it. The only difference between us and you is we just did it. That like, trust me, you probably have more talent than us. We just said, well, we're gonna do it.
Now, I will
and we
say this
called on all
much,
of our
though.
friends, you know.
I gotta say this much though. You guys knocked it out of the ballpark. Like that game is a blast. Like to me personally, on the outside looking in, I had nothing to do with the development of it or anything. Uh, it reminds me so much of an upgraded version of Adventure. It's like Adventure if you cranked it up to 11. That game is such a blast to play.
Well, that was, we did not set out. Well, oh, we is a funny thing because everybody had a different idea of what it was going to be, right? Which probably made it what it was. But at no point did I or anybody else ever say, "Hey, we're going to do, adventure," but our our take of it, right? That was never a discussion. But I am not going to sit here and tell you or anybody else, oh, there's no influence of adventure in there. Of course there's. There's influence of Pac-Man. There's influence of all kinds of games in there that, because where the hell do you think we got our ideas from, So, yeah, there is. And I think that it was SoCal Mike that had a whole lot of ideas of like he referenced, games like adventure, games like Pac-Man, and say, hey, well, that play mechanic of like, the guy that rearranges things or moves an asset. Let's That's a great play mechanic. That play mechanic may have first been used in Adventure. It's been used in, I don't know, like thousands of games ever since. It's just an NPC stealing some of your stash is just video games 101. So I mean,
Right. I
yeah,
mean,
we use definitely those
I feel
ideas.
like that it's like again I compare it to Adventure a bit, but to me, CGE Adventures is more or less a role playing game. Again, on the 2600, and in my opinion, it's one of the best out there. And I'm not talking just homebrew; I'm talking one of the best for the 2600. I had a blast with it.
Oh, yeah, and I appreciate that, and the false humility thing, is annoying. It is a great game, and it does have a tremendous tier status to some of the best games out there. I am not for a minute saying, well, we're clearly just as smart as Howard Scott Warshaw in game design, because the guy actually worked for Atari and made a shit ton of the games that we love and cherish. But um, you know, we're not stupid people. And yeah, we created a cool game. And when I say that, speaking to the listener out there, are no different than us, possibly, probably better positioned. You're probably just as smart as Howard Scott Warshaw. You, like you talk to guys like Bob Polero who did, Defender and all. Yet you talk to these guys that created these games, and they're a dude just like you. They work in the tech industry just like you. They have to pay a mortgage. They're ordinary people, and every one of them would tell you, man, go make your game too. You can do it. I did it. You can do it. There's nothing magic about me. And yeah, so I would say to like any listener out there that you can probably make a really good game. Now, the total cheat here that I don't want, for a second to, let this audio get out there without giving this caveat is they did not have the tool chain that we have.
Right.
Batari Basic did not exist. You did not have a, 8-core i7, you know, with,
We've got
GIMP.
40 years of development and research into the system that they didn't have back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to code together, you're going to whack together the graphics, some of it is still done the old way. Like you actually draw out with, pencil on a graph thing, your scenery, you calculate the width of pixels. And somebody says, hey man, it's really hard to get away from podcasters when you go down some of these corners because it's too tight, and you don't know until you try. So now you got to go through and redraw this whole thing and make it 1 pixel wider, 2 pixel wider, 3 pixels wider, and then see what feels good. And there's two takeaways I really learned from this process. One was how easy it is to make a game that's too easy or too hard, and how hard it is to make a game that's rightly calibrated for a first time player and then for the guy that plays it his third, fourth, fifth time, without him saying, "This game sucked. It's too hard. I couldn't even figure it out," or "It's so easy. I figured it out in the first play and I got nothing out of it." You want a game, a minute to learn, a lifetime to master, all that, and it's so hard to do that because once think about, like, say Mario Brothers, right? The first Super Mario Brothers. You play that game the first time, it was a very different experience than after the third year you owned it. But when you've spent a year playing a game and the surprises aren't as surprising, you kind of know what to do first. You have memorized the maze at that point,
Hmm.
and you just because you drew it, it's very easy to lose all touch. And this is probably what makes good video game producers, directors, designers, industry capable versus one hit wonders like us. Is we had to continuously go to people and say, "Here, play this and tell me what you think," because we had lost all touch with how difficult it was or wasn't. Um, and that's a very real part of making your own game.
And that's
But
something
again,
that
I
some people
say
struggled with back then too, because again, like going back to Mario
absolutely they
Brothers,
did.
going back to Mario real quick, 1-1. It was designed to teach you how to play that game. Everything was placed in that level so precisely to kind of guide you in learning how to play that game. That first Goomba there, it's telling you, hey, you got to jump over me or I'm going to kill you. You start
Dude,
jumping, and immediately you start jumping. Well, if I can jump over a Goomba, what else can I do? You got this big blinky thing at you. I'm gonna jump and hit it. Oh, something popped out. You grab it. Oh, I grew. Everything around that game was built around teaching you. And some Atari games did a good job of that, and some games did horrible. I talked about E.T. earlier. I think it's a good game, but I think it did a horrible job at teaching the player what to do.
oh, one of the worst. One of the worst. Like in a pinball world, some pinball is, unless you know how to play pinball, very inaccessible to the player. Like so they just end up playing this 18-inch game of trying to keep the ball out of the hole. They have no idea what's going on. Other games like Family Guy and, honest to God, Shrek, because it's the same game with a different skin, do masterful jobs of teaching you how to play pinball. Like, I would say, like, any pinball wannabe fan, or like somebody that doesn't, if you tell me, like they say, like, "Oh, we let people who hate cats, adopt a cat for a weekend and see if they still hate cats." If you think pinball isn't your thing, or if you're not sure, whatever, play Family Guy. Let it teach you how to play pinball, and then now, play other games. And now that you got a tutorial on how you actually play pinball,
Hmm.
and it's amazing what happens when people take that chance and that opportunity.
Another pinball game I
But
gotta bring up that does the same thing, in my opinion, is probably Pinbot, which I think it does an awesome job of
yeah,
teaching
yeah.
someone who's new to pinball. Okay, well, you're not just keeping the ball until it sinks. There's goals on this table that you need to achieve.
And that's what is sadly not well communicated in a lot of games. I think that was fantastic of how Family Guy did that. So that was a feature that we had kind of in mind of, okay, how are we going to do that? But one of the things that for me was a huge lesson in all this, and it's not fun if you don't tell on yourself and all, is, like I was telling you, how like things become lost to history. Like, how on earth did uh you know Abney and Bushnell were there at Nutty and Associates? They designed Computer Space, and they don't remember how many they made or what the name of the company was, like that made the shell, like the cabinet. So Ted and I were talking one day, and I was like, dude, so, like, for real, you don't remember where you got the shell made? He goes, "No, there's because they're all of the vendors that did wood, but at the time, fiberglass was like the carbon fiber of the '60s. And it was like the Corvette had been fiberglass, and fiberglass was amazing. So we wanted to do something space age, something, because there was no guarantee that video games were going to look like video games because it had never been done. One of the ideas at the time that had been sketched up by other, kind of like the Wright brothers, right?
Hmm.
They were the first to do powered flight, but people across the globe were cracking away at that nut. and that was just that technology. The time had arrived for it. So there were a lot of people cracking away at video games at that time. And one of the things that, when they did it, they said, let's kind of, put it in a pinball cabinet. Like, so have the monitor facing up at you, have a sign that shows what the game is, where the scoreboard would be. That could have been the first couple of video games, or maybe all of them, because pinball was the physical format. Well, I was talking, like I said, I was talking to Ted. I said, so you guys, like, you don't remember the name of the company, the fiberglass, but he goes, no, no, it's like, we're out driving around, we're talking about, making the cabinet, and we said, okay, well, how do you get, what about fiberglass? That's high tech. It's like, well, how do you get that done? It's like, well, I bought a fiberglass hot tub. Maybe, like the hot tub guys, they could, I bet they could probably make something like that. So, he was telling me, yeah, you drive down this road, you go, out past, this roller rink, and there's a convenience store, and across was this like industrial lot, and there were like these racks that held all this tubing and stuff along the train tracks. So we rolled up in there. I was on my motorcycle, and we went in and talked to this guy, and he showed us the spray guns, the chop guns, the molding process, and gave us kind of a ballpark price quote of what it would take to do it. And we talked about it, and I'm like, I can totally see, after talking to him and him describing it, how he could remember, because we all have things like that in our life. There's a place you used to live, a place you used to, something in your life that you could describe all kinds of things, but you can't remember what the hell the name of the place was.
Right.
I totally get how that happens. So let me tell you about the things that we lost and forgot. And, it's almost like we literally learned every lesson, good and bad. We became like parody of what we had always questioned or criticized. It was a humbling lesson to go, oh yeah, that's how it happens. Um, so you look at people like Kurt Vendel. He used to go to Atari's buildings when they were still in business, and when they would like fill the dumpsters, he would go fill his car, and he was the guy that archived and saved all that stuff. So what did we lose, and how did we lose it? Well, let's see. Uh, at some point in our chat, every time we do a revision of the game, which sometimes is several times a week, sometimes once a week, I would say they're probably no less than 40, easy 40 individual builds. Some of them was just a gray scenery with a character moving. Some of it was a maze with no characters. Some of it had no sound. Some of it had no intro. And it was all the iterative, releases leading up to the final version, right? They're all gone because Atari Age didn't archive it, because we were doing this in like a chat, just like you and I are chatting in Discord. We were doing this stuff in like a chat group, and then I was the only one that thought about archiving it, because just nobody thought about it. So I thought, I'm going to save all this, right? So I just did right click save as for each iteration, and I had this folder, and there's all this other stuff in there, all the original artwork, and none of us thought like, well, I mean, if we ever wanted anything, we can just go to the thread and grab it. All that stuff was gone,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had to. I normally have pretty good discipline. This is actually the thing that kicked me in the ass on real backups. Is nowadays I have like proper NASs with terabytes and terabytes of storage. One backs up to the other one remotely, and I'm not losing a damn thing. But I didn't necessarily do that at the time. I had, like drives, and I do a backup, but this is like sitting on this one drive. And one day, like, I couldn't read anything off the drive. And, it'd been like, people used to come to work and say, oh, I'm late because I had car trouble. Nobody questioned it. Dave, when was the last time somebody showed up late because of car trouble? It doesn't happen. Uh, so things like, when was the last time you honestly really had a hard drive crash? Probably been a while.
Right.
So, you know, you let your guard down. So what happened is the master file table for both, there's like a primary and a secondary, both got corrupted. So the data was just gone. like you could have like mailed it off to like a specialist who for an exorbitant fee could have recovered some of that data maybe. And we were just like, ah, shit, it's gone. So that's how we lost like everything except for like the completed version. And, you know, like I literally have one prototype. So when I made the first physical cartridge, because whenever we like do the ROM, we would copy it to a Harmony cart and then play it on the Harmony cart. That was our main development tool.
Hmm.
Well, I um I made the first physical cart, and I printed like just using like a color laser. I printed the first iteration of the box cover, and I burned that first that almost final version of the ROM, and printed like again just on a color laser, not the bulk printing that we did for the product. And I didn't think to like mark this thing, like I didn't put it in a freaking vacuum seal bag that said prototype number one. The way I can tell them apart is the color of the blue on the spine is much darker on the laser printed one versus the one that we ordered from the printer that was done professionally. So I know that that's the prototype. And if I open it up, I can tell, yeah, the manual's different. And, those things, there's differences. And I know what it was, right? But that one was the version prior to the final version, which there was almost no changes between the two, almost none. Um, and then we didn't use GitHub. We didn't have a change log. The
Right.
change log was our daily chat. So yeah, we lost all the other versions except for the final one and the almost final one. We lost the original graphics files. Um, we have the actual, original prototype, one of one. I have the first PAL one too. So I do have the first prototype. I do have the first PAL cartridge and the first NTSC. I have those three. And then, when we ordered all the production ones, one of the first things I did is I assembled my own game. I snapped the case together. I snapped, and then I immediately opened it back up. And there's like, oh shit, there's my own Atari game and a manual. And even though I just assembled it 10 seconds prior, it was like, that was like the journey from being the dopey kid sitting in front of, the TV to actually like, we have made our own Atari game. Um, and it was kind of surreal that it was there. But
I
yeah,
can
so
definitely relate to the data loss thing because I've got a book I've been working on now for almost 3 years, and I had one point, almost like a year and 3/4 of another year in, where I completely lost all the files I was working on due to an OS change. I had moved all of my files for the book over to a USB drive, installed the new operating system, plug in the thumb drive, and it's dead. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
yeah, like what are the odds? And there's somebody out there, somebody who's listening who's going, well, amateur hour, I would never make those. Sure, you would. I know, no doubt. Of course, you wouldn't. You alone are uniquely incapable of fucking this up.
Everyone
That's why your
makes
game is
those.
so awesome.
Everyone makes those mistakes. I mean, it's just like hammering a nail into a board. Eventually, you're going to miss the head of the nail. You're going to smack your thumb with a hammer. You can say you won't do it, but everyone does it.
Oh yeah. So I do have like, rolled up actual level map that was hand drawn. I do have these prototypes. So, we didn't lose everything. But yeah, we lost a lot of um and again nowadays, man, that would never happen these days because all the computers are, all properly on the NAS with NFS. So if I save something to the download folder, it's accessible across every computer on my network. It's backed up over two NASs locally across, RAID 5 on two different machines. And then, of course, it goes over to my backup NAS off site. I would never. I did learn from that mistake, but I made that mistake, and nobody else even thought to archive it. So uh, I was like UK Mike and I. He were having this discussion. I was like, yeah. So I think that's all gone. He was like, yeah, I didn't even think to save it. So it was a team effort, but we managed to not retain. So now that I look back on it, what company out there that made these great games and all that? There's almost none of them. Like maybe Nintendo and Sony, but they're never going to let you see it ever.
Right.
Maybe they have archives where they have a lot of this stuff preserved, right? Like Nintendo, it makes me wonder, man, because remember the time, like they go after every ROM site ever, but remember the time that they got caught using ROMs off of a ROM site?
Right, which makes you
Well,
wonder, do
maybe it
they
was
even have copies of the stuff?
no doubt, maybe, just maybe, it was a lazy developer who didn't want to, fill out the request form and wait in line and, have his manager ask why you need access to the Mario ROM when in fact you're making a Mario act. Maybe he's like, I'm not having that stupid discussion with Steve again. I'm not doing it. And he just got off a website. We don't know. Or maybe Nintendo doesn't have an archive and they lost everything. You know, any of these things are possible.
And that's a
But
huge
I don't
reason
know
why
about
for my
them.
ROM collection, it's mirrored. Like, I've got a copy of it. I've got it saved to the cloud. My buddy has a copy of it because I'm scared to death. Like, with the ROMs, yeah, they're easily available now. But, like, with the way the internet's going, with the way censorship's going, I know this is going in a completely different direction, is this stuff going
Oh,
to
but
be
a vital
available?
one, a vital one. Yes, sir. That's why I'm sitting on over a petabyte of storage space in front of me here because I archive everything. Because today you can go to a website, you can find one that the program that you were going to watch is no longer there, or even a greater sin is that they've censored it to account for problematic content. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you mean something that stood for 40 years until it didn't meet the wokest of the woke criteria from, you know, the 52nd week of 22, not the 51st. Because on the 51st week, that was fine and good. On the 52nd week, now it's inappropriate, so you're going to delete it. What will you delete tomorrow? I
Right.
mean, if you've ever read the book 1984, isn't it kind of funny that Winston's job was to literally delete things that were inconvenient to the establishment?
We're living in that age
So that's
now. I mean,
we
we're
are
there.
100%. It is, and it's almost codified. Well, it is being codified by law. Um, the old political commissars, like, if you look back at the Soviet Union, you can say, how could they be such stupid, servile scum? I mean, they had a commissar, a political officer in their factory that monitored their speech. How different is that today?
Right?
The new commissar just sits in the HR department.
Yeah,
And
it's the same thing
so,
under a
yeah,
different
man,
name.
that's right. And to steer it back into the video game world and all, if you're not archiving your ROMs, and do not trust, do not believe that they will always be available easily. Now, like I'm always gonna, because people like me and you, right? We have curated this ROM collection. We have deduplicated things. We've, made sure that we have working ones. We've, you know, we have as many systems. We have got this thing. So, if somebody ever approached us and said, "Hey, dude, here's a USB stick. Can you hook me up?" Love to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as mass availability, uh, yeah, you can't trust that that's going to be here today, tomorrow, or the day after.
And there's
So,
already stuff in my collection that if I were to go online and look for, I couldn't find it. Like there's stuff in there, especially for the
absolutely.
PlayStation stuff. I've got like PlayStation demo discs from like magazines and whatnot, to where if you were to go look on like archive.org or something today, which is where a lot of people go to find this stuff, you wouldn't find it because it was hosted on, I believe it was, good lord, the site was known for their MAME ROMs, but they had collections for everything, and Like I said, one day they shut out the lights and they're gone, and all those files, if you didn't get them, they're gone.
And yeah, and some of those things are more, I mean, because someone will point out, oh, but I can find all of the, Fairchild files, but 10 years ago I couldn't find any. I mean, not it doesn't all go uniformly in one direction, but you're either a liar or a fool if you don't think that is the overwhelming trend. And yeah, man, I mean, get it while you can, archive it and preserve it. But that to me, I mean, kind of the final point I think I want to make about the magic of Atari and, the endearing part of that era is like I'm a physical collector. I like having the thing. Like my buddy UK Mike, he likes having the ROM, the game. He doesn't feel the need to have like a whole lot of the original physical hardware. He has a more limited collection because he just doesn't have that same compulsive drive. I want to have the thing, the
Mm-hmm.
actual thing. And to me, that is like, I don't dislike modern games at all. And I look at like say, okay, I got my PS5, it's sitting up there, the Switch, the Xbox, all the new systems are sitting up there. I mean, on the screen here in the studio, I've got the Super Mario Brothers Wonder sitting there, literally on the screen with the Switch. I want to go in and I want to buy tons of games and I want to have tons of great content to play and I want to see this continue. I don't dislike modern games, but the thing is, and I know my purchasing window is coming to a close. I'm not gonna because of all these reasons we discussed in the last 10, 15 minutes. I'm not gonna go buy a a digital copy. I won't do it. One, because manufacturers, man, all they want to do is get rid of that physical media so they can charge the same price and pocket 5 more bucks.
Not only that, they want you
Or
to
I mean,
repurchase everything again. How many times have
yes,
someone bought Super Mario Brothers? Well, I got it back whenever it was on the regular Nintendo. I got the upgraded version on the Super Nintendo. I got it on the Wii. I got it on the Wii U. I got it on the little handheld game. And I mean, they want you to buy the game 15 times. Or even
exactly.
worse,
And
they want you
and
to subscribe to be able to play it.
yeah, and I that no sir, I'm not doing it. But I have absolutely uh I won't do it. I won't buy the digital only. So when I can like I've still got this cartridge for this Switch. I've still got the disc for the PlayStation. Now, how practical a lot of stuff turns out to be with its survivability and all, but there will be a point at which somebody makes a cartridge for the Switch that holds every ROM and jailbreaks it from just power up with it. All these things happen. Every
Mm-hmm.
console gets cracked. None of these things are immune. So that's why I don't even sweat it these days, man. I just update my current console to the latest firmware. I buy all the games. I don't even care about like downloading the new Mario Wonder. I want to go buy it because one, I want them to make another, and I want to have the physical cartridge. But dude, if you don't think for a second, I won't download every ROM never was. Yes, I will. But
Right.
as I said earlier, that does not in any way the existence of those ROMs prevent me from buying a quality product. Clearly Nintendo, I got the Switch, I got the Wii, bought every damn console they made, and I've got cases and cases of the actual physical media that I bought. They got my money. But yeah, dude, no, I'm gonna archive every ROM. I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna play Mario on, RetroPie. And no, I'm not gonna feel bad about it. No, I'm not stealing from you, and you'll be okay, Nintendo.
Yep, because we've already
But
paid
like,
for it 15 times over.
exactly. But like, like say with Atari, just to go, back to Atari, a company that has the Atari name, that's not Atari. And none of the original guys are there. It's not, it's just somebody that bought a name and they're going to release a product, right? What right do they have in any way claim some sort of control ownership over my collection?
Right.
And the beauty of the Atari era, especially the 2600 era, is I've got the Atari console right here. I've got the Harmony card that has every ROM ever made on an SD card. I can play the crap out of it. And I have a physical copy of every single game I can think of, except for maybe a few like there's one or six or I think I even have one where was only 6. But I've got all these games, and there is literally nothing, nothing that Atari, the current rights holders, can do to reach into my collection and damage or disable those games. But if you have a manufacturer that's got access into your console, man, the future is going to be, like quicksand.
It's gonna
Nothing to
be
be solid.
bleak.
You thought you had that game, now it's gone.
Before you wrap up, I do want to ask, even though you've gone over it on a retro gaming roundup many a time, childhood memories, favorite 2600 games. What have you got?
Well, I guess my first exposures to it, right? Because I got a computer very early on. I was playing like games like Ultima, which were just unbelievable in their scope and their incredible, worlds,
Yep,
um,
Ultima
and
4 is still a
I
favorite of
didn't
mine.
feel. Oh yeah, I didn't in any way feel like I didn't have sufficient video game. Oh, and then when a Commodore hit and all that. But I always felt pretty happy with computers. But when uh when the 2600 was the dominant, not just business wise, but socially when you're a kid, and you remember all the great fads of the 70s and 90s and all that stuff. Um, you wanted to be a part of that. That was the part of the scene of your childhood. So for me, there's a kid. His name was Sean, and like back in the day, you like there's no cell phones. You came home at dark, and your mom had dinner ready, whatever.
Hmm.
And I remember my friend Sean, we would just make arrangements like, hey, let's spend the night over at Sean's place, right? So, I would from Sean's telephone, call my home number. And, my mother was there. I'm like, hey, mom, I'm going to stay over at Sean's house tonight. We're going to play Atari and all. And my other friend Josh would stay there. And so he had a Atari, and neither of us did. I remember like sitting there and we're just swapping out cartridges one after the other. It goes in the slot, ka-chunk, turn it on, let's play this one. And we're just having the best time ever playing this Atari. And that kind of, early first experience, because I mean, not everybody, when we look at release dates, okay, 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System, is all right. Almost nobody walked into the store in '85 and bought a Nintendo and began their collection. It's not like it is today.
Right.
And any of your listeners, if they weren't alive or old enough to remember all this, one of the huge takeaways, I hit on this, early in our talk. Um, One of the takeaways here is how slowly this whole ball got rolling. And yeah, man, like there was no shit a period of time where the Atari was emerging like 4 years after it was originally put on the marketplace was maybe the first time that many people sat down and experienced it and then ended up buying one for themselves.
Let's
So
see.
it wasn't like, all right,
In my case, I got it as a hand-me-down system because I got it back when the Nintendo was
many people
big.
did.
But dear God, the game collection was amazing. I think I can't tell you how many hours I sat. And a great example, a horrible port, Pac-Man for the Atari 2600. I played the hell out of it. Why? Because that was the version I had. I didn't have the Miss Pac-Man Superior version. I had the significantly worse version. And I knew, even at that age, because I've seen Pac-Man in the arcade, I'm here like, this looks nothing like the game I'm familiar with, but it kind of plays like... So, I played it. Good port, Space Invaders. I played Space Invaders like crazy. Pitfall, to me, looked amazing on that system. Played the hell out of Asteroids. I mentioned E.T. a few times. Demon Attack I played a lot of. And then later on, I've rediscovered games that were huge back then that I had never heard of. Yar's Revenge, huge game for the system because I didn't get it in that hand me down collection. I never played it until years later. Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, same thing. Crazy good game. I didn't have it until years later, though, so I didn't play it.
And that is a huge thing to, for any of your listeners that were not there in the day or don't remember it or, or any, like, let's say, you're 25 years old and you found this podcast and you're listening to it, right? The thing is, our life wasn't like your life today. We didn't have social media. We didn't have online things. If your local arcade did not have Tempest, guess what? You never played Tempest
Yep.
unless you're traveling on vacation and there's a Tempest there. But for the most part, you is somebody had to have that game, that arcade game, that pinball in your town, in an establishment that you visited for you to have ever played it. And like the Vectrex was really cool. I saw a picture of it in a comic book, okay? It was not available, like no store carried it, so I couldn't even play the store demo version, okay? No friend had it. It wasn't a thing. I saw a picture of it. I knew it existed until like I downloaded the first emulator pack and started playing it. I had never played one, right? And now I love the thing. It's a great system. But, just because it existed back in the day doesn't mean that you ever got a chance to play it. Today, pretty much everything's available. Any game is released on all systems. If you have one of the three major systems, you pretty much have the ability to play any game instantaneously on demand, right? We didn't have that. So, yeah, it was a whole different world, man.
A great example for
And
me
one
would be
that,
the Sega Master System. I didn't know it existed. I'm like looking at everything for the Genesis. I thought it was Sega's first system for the longest time until I got another hand-me-down system, and it was a Sega Master System with like 12 or 15 games. I'm like, what's this? It has Sega on it, but this is not a Genesis. And you pop in the games, and they're competing with the NES games in many cases, and it was mind blowing because I had no clue this thing even existed.
well, sure. And man, some of those Master System ports were, spot on. Like who would ever thought Golden Axe would be on that, And it's a good port of it.
Space
But yeah,
Harrier was a shocking one for me. The biggest shock in that one was probably the Ghostbusters game on that because it was like the NES game, but it was actually like really good. It was based off the NES version, but like the Master System versus the NES for that game was night and day.
oh, absolutely, man. So, for me, the permanency of the Atari collection, and it gets older and older each year. It's kind of crazy. Like I remember, when video games had turned 40, like when Computer Space and the Odyssey hit 40 years old. And that seemed like, and all of a sudden it was 50, you know. And, like for me, I can't conceive of a time before TV. I mean, I certainly can. Like but I didn't live it. I didn't experience it,
Hmm.
I love radio. I love like, old school sci-fi radio plays and all that. Being a ham radio and electronics guy, I certainly own a whole bunch of tube radios. It's not an alien technology to me. I grew up, with a CRT TV with manual, tuners, and all that stuff was normal. But TV just kind of always was. There were shows from the 50s in black and white, like the Honeymooners, and it seems like it always was. But you talk to your parents, like your grandparents who served in World War II, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember when TV came along, and you're like, whoa, And it's kind of funny today. Like, I talk to some of the younger people I work with, and they're in their mid 20s, and to them, just the world without the internet is kind of odd to them.
Well, it was a
The
totally
world
different
without,
era. You weren't able to like whip your phone out of your pocket and look something up if you didn't have that information, and you just didn't have that information unless you like maybe it was in the library or something. There was no way to get that information. It was a completely different world.
yeah, and would I say that it was better, less than, whatever? Nah, they're just different. But
Exactly. That's what I
yeah, I
would
mean,
call it.
for us today, you talk to these young people, and they're trying to put the Atari, its library, all that into their framework, right? Where like the day that the the PS4 launched, they got one and they had access to a whole bunch of games and instant Facebooking and Discording about it. No, man, it was a much slower roll and a much slower revelation, at a slower pace. Even though you're a kid, things seem so frantic and so new. But yeah, I think the Atari was just, to truly understand it, you have to kind of take a step back and look at the era if you didn't grow up in that era. And things were all new, like home computers. Our generation, we got the first home computers. We got the first consoles. It was the first of all this stuff. So, whereas the iteration of the latest television set isn't all that exciting, the first, one was kind of a big deal. And that's how it is with the Atari too. It was this incredible experience to watch it evolve, to watch it literally be born, to watch it evolve, to watch it kind of go away, to watch the company flitter away its potential. Man, yeah, that was a whole different experience, and I'm glad I lived through it and saw there's certain, like, all cars will be old cars. Not all cars will be classic cars.
Exactly.
Um,
No
you
one's
know,
shopping for the Pinto these days.
Actually, that's the weird thing is somebody you show, like, I go to this car show near the house, and like you show up there with Lotus, Ferrari, Lambo, you're one of 12.
Hmm.
I mean, like, if you go to a local car show, yeah, you'd probably be the only one there, right? Okay, cool. But you go to like Cars and Coffee, man, you're one of a dozen, if not one of 20. And you're not. It's not that special. I take like I take my '82 Subaru to that car show, and people lose their minds. Like, you bring out, like, the 360, and people are like, oh, another Ferrari. You bring out like 82 Super, like, holy shit, man! And that's the weird thing is now we're in this weird era where you break out the the Pinto, and you have a running surviving Pinto with all like the day it came off the showroom floor. You got something people hadn't seen. It was a huge part of their lives, even if they mocked it. Like, come on, the Samurai. We we roasted the Suzuki Samurai, right?
Hmm.
And now people would, like, kill for one. It's just funny how that happens. But yeah, I mean, like, that the Atari, man, 77, right? We had the 50 years of Atari, as a company. That was just done. They did a beautiful game with that, sort of a interactive museum.
Oh yeah, Atari
Yeah,
50.
50 years.
It was
I
really
have
well
to
made.
say, and like I said, I might have every Atari ROM ever made. An Atari completely screwed up delivering what if Atari never went away? And I didn't buy VCS. I'm not going to buy one. It's crap. And I didn't choose to not buy it because I have ROMs. That's not why I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it because it was shit. But at 50 years of Atari, wonderfully produced, take my money. I couldn't wait to buy their product. And guess what? I had all the ROMs. So
Yep.
sorry.
I
But
mean,
I
just like the same thing these days. Although we joke about the Pinto or anything, I'm going to go work on the Coronet before I work on the Pinto.
well, yeah. I mean, come on. But no, that is the cool thing about the Atari era is we look at it and you know that 2600 is it's coming up on 50 years, man, which is kind of crazy. But at some point, we'll remember, like, when you and I are sitting there at 80 years old, which isn't forever off. It's closer than it is further, and you're like, man, what? One day I'll be sitting there not saying, oh, video games are 40, they're 50. There's Video games are 80 years old now,
Hmm.
and you'll have that original Atari with those original cartridges, and you'll have that same ability to experience exactly what you experienced then. Um, that you're probably not going to have with a lot of systems. So it's never a bad time to collect these. I mean, I would say they have roughly the same availability and roughly the same pricing as they did 10, 20 years ago. Same thing like the Model T. People think it's rare. No, there's probably a Model T or Model A for sale within 1 hour of your house, and it's under $20,000, and it's great. So it's attainable. You can buy an Atari, you can buy games, you can buy a multi-cart, and it'll cost you like for the cost of 3 modern games. You can buy an Atari, a multi-cart, and some cool stuff to go with it. And you can achieve this. You can collect this and you can enjoy it. And maybe you'll go on to make your own Atari game.
And I want to close up by saying that the 2600 is not dead even today. Like the November 17th, they're releasing another console that is the Atari 2600. They're releasing cartridges for the thing. It's called the 2600 Plus. It's got, cartridges of Adventure, Combat, Video Pinball, Yar's Revenge. It runs on a USB. So it's not a dead system. Definitely go back and collect the original stuff, but don't think it's dead. The stuff is still out there. It's not Atari anymore. It's a completely different name, but I love to see the fact that the legacy that those people created back then, it's still living on today.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys, they're a lot of them are just now hitting their retirement age. I mean, they're in their late 50s because they were just a few years older than us in some cases. Um, some of them in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, and some of them we've already lost. I mean, you know, Keith and Ted and so many of those guys that, have passed away. Their stories, hopefully, a lot of it got preserved. Some of it will be lost. Um, but there will be a point like you think of the most famous guys from like the 20s, right?
Hmm.
Marx Brothers, okay, but there was a point at which, Marx Brothers movies, it's still out there. If you're a aficionado, you'll seek it out. But like, all right, who was like the big guy in music and entertainment? A guy by the name of Eddie Cantor, right?
Hmm.
And like, if you watch Boardwalk Empire, you'll see like Eddie Cantor referenced, and they'll like he would be at a party, and you're like, holy shit, man, that was. But there's a point like who really goes back? You can listen, like we're all still listening to Led Zeppelin, right? How many Eddie Cantor albums do you have, and how often does he come up in the day, right?
Right.
So all things evolve, man. I mean, at some point, I hate to say it, but you and I will probably be, as we're, shuffling off and dying, somebody out there will want our collections, and you know, I've always, I kind of turned a corner on thinking about collecting in a way where a great car collector that I like, he said something cool that we are the custodians of these cars. Yeah, we own them, like we can go out there and melt them down or hot rod, we can do anything we want to do, but ultimately I don't know, like 2 owners back, I don't know who owned this car. And like in 50 years, whoever owns this car won't know and probably won't care about me.
Hmm.
I'm not owning this car forever. I'm the custodian of it during my time. And that is really, Chris, how I look at collecting and how I've come to look at, like, say, the Atari era is right now, I am the custodian of this collection. I didn't create it. Well, not all of it. I created tiny, tiny little bit, but I didn't create it. I didn't, you know, I bought some of it original, some of it secondhand. But I've amassed this collection of all this original hardware, as many, many people have. And one day, this won't be mine. Unless there's some crazy advances in medical science, or I radically roll back my high risk lifestyle. There is about 1,000% absolute chance that in 50 years I will not be alive, and that these games will be in somebody else's collection who's going to sit there and go, hey, guys, why don't we roll over to my place tonight? I'm going to break up my 100-year-old video game system and we're going to play a game. And somebody will pull out the Atari that at one point I owned, that they have no idea who the fuck I am. Or like, I don't know the kid that originally owned my main 2600 that's sitting on top. I have no idea what kid got that on Christmas morning. That is gone. It's lost forever to history. So at some point, somebody, 50 years from now, is going to pull out the Atari that I was custodian of, and they're going to go, hey, man, I got this 100-year-old video game system. And, How cool is that?
Well,
But
to me,
it's the
to,
moment we live in.
to me, it's not only about keeping that legacy alive, but it's like remembering how much fun and joy this stuff brought to you, and hoping that you can give someone else that same experience at a later time.
Oh, absolutely, man. And that is one of the fun parts about it that never gets old. And that's why, like you're doing what you're doing right now is you're being you're fulfilling the role of an amateur historian, you're documenting, you know, interviews of people that had hands-on experience in the era, right?
Hmm.
And it's so important. I mean, right now, like our World War II veterans are the last of them. The guy that was like 17 and a half when he hit the beaches at Normandy is now probably ain't going to be here in a couple of years, right?
Right.
And, like we grew up with World War II veterans as our grandparents. My bus driver was a World War II veteran. That dude barely survived the Pacific. You think he gave the slyest of shits if you were late for the bus? Nope, off he goes. You can run to school,
Right.
Um, and it was that no coddling, no bullshit. I survived, Japanese flamethrowers, so the least you can do is show up to the bus on time, and it taught us something. We learned from it. And you look at their history and knowing people that had those experiences, video games, it's not the same thing, man. I mean, come on, it's video games. But it's still a huge part of, tech, of Americana, of culture, of civilization, and it's art. It's as valid as any other art expression. And here we are, like you're creating a recorded oral history of the era as a historian, and we, me, you, and so many of your listeners are preserving these collections in our, climate controlled spaces, and careful maintenance and cleaning, and you know we're the archivists. We're the guys, man. I mean, you know somebody at the Smithsonian 50 years from now that never played an Atari once will put on their blue gloves and pull back the white, cloth, and oh, this is one of our collections of a 100-year-old video game system, right? And they'll think that they're somehow the official record and maintainer of this. Now, someone's gonna go back and listen to your podcast, and you know maybe they'll be the one that actually ends up owning your 2600. We're the real archivists. We're the pros. We're the guys that matter. Um, you know, yeah, it's great if official institutions do it, but eh, this is the real deal.
And that's why I give a another plug to Retro Gaming Roundup, because like the back catalog, there are so many snapshots in time with all the interviews, all the top tens of people who have actually sat down and played and grew up with these games. Like, not only is there the physical games, but there's the emotion behind it, and I feel that's something that needs documented too.
Absolutely, and that's why we do what we do, man. But is there anything else you want to hit before we wrap up? Any
No,
last?
that's probably it. I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to talk to me, though. I really appreciate it. And if you want, before we go, if you want to give another shout out to Retro Gaming Roundup and CGE Adventures, which, by the way, the ROM is available at RetroGamingRoundup.com if you want to play. And I do believe there are still some physical copies left if you'd like to get your own copy.
Sorta. So funny enough, people say, "Well, the guy, well, I am the guy, and I got the box right here." I think I've got like 6 cartridges left, maybe. I mean, look, we sold a ton of them first, and then you kind of saturate the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I do have like, I don't think we have any manuals left. I think we have like 6 cartridges and boxes, and we're out of PAL. None of those left. So I think maybe I've got, and the boxes, like, it's not like I keep these framed on a rack next to my weapon, ready to go out the door. No, they're
Right.
in a box in a plastic tub next to my Christmas decorations. Sorry, there's no glass walled museum in the basement for the game. Which makes you wonder, just in general, like, for the others, like, if this is our archive standard, like, I literally have a Rubbermaid tote that has all the the cases and the cartridges and the manuals and stuff. Um, you know, sometimes there's nothing. There's no there's no extras or preservation. So, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting to see the other side of it and go, oh, that's why people don't have nice things.
Now, a chunk of my collection is currently in totes too, so I totally get that. But yeah, anyone who wants to play the game, ROM is directly available. It's definitely worth playing, in my opinion. Just to get a snapshot of the entire development history that Scott explained earlier. Once again, I want to appreciate and thank you for taking the time out to talk to me about the history of Atari and branching out into the CGE adventures. Do you want to give a quick plug to?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to give another
Yeah,
quick plug,
I mean,
real
I
quick?
think you kind of, well, I think you kind of gave a really good plug there. Our show's out there forever. You know, we don't charge for it. We don't monetize it. We don't, we have a couple of sponsors, and that lets like when we go to like Blackpool and we, book a booth and it's $500. It's not coming out of our pockets. It's graciously donated by listeners. So okay, we're all going to buy plane tickets. We're going to go over there, spend a couple thousand, and the fact that we sold some games or somebody donated some money because they like the content, it makes it a little easier to do those things, and we definitely appreciate that. But the plug I would give is really to the listener who is hearing your podcast and says, man, maybe I could make my own. Well, go out there and do it because I'd like to buy it. I want to have more classic, kick-ass, games on that platform. So, yeah, dude, if you think you can make your own, or even if you think you can't, look into it. Give it a try. It's probably more achievable than you thought.
Absolutely. Like I said, there's tons of creativity out there, and I would love to see more as well. But I guess we'll close it out with that, man. Once again, I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to come and chat with me.
Absolutely, man. Fun experience.
Yep, thank you.
The fun is back, oh yes siree. It's the 2600 from Atari. It's the video system with classics galore, from Space Invaders to cars that roar. A real hit joystick controls the screen. Solaris is hot and Midnight Magic's mean. And one more thing, it's got a special low price, under $50. $50? Now isn't that nice? The fun is back, oh yes siree. It's the 2600 from Atari.
Something's coming up the plumbing, poor Luigi's in a bind. Giant turtles out to get him, creepy crabs are right behind. Spider flies, cheaper shikes, they're all coming out the pipes.
Mario, where are you? It's Atari Mario Brothers with Mario from Donkey Kong, his brother Luigi, and lots of crazy creatures. And it's twice the fun when two play at once, because you need all the help you can get. Mario, where are you? Mario Brothers, new from Atari.
From Atari, made especially for systems from Atari. The video game that lets you help E.T. get home. Just in time for Christmas. Happy holidays from Atari.
Oh, Star Wars. It's great in the arcade. Whoa! TIE fighters! Fireballs! Coming right at me! Watch the laser towers. Aim for the tops. Pick in the cutouts. Use the force. It's coming too fast! It's late! It's late! My shields are gone! All right! I'm going in!
Oh, some game, huh?
Some game!
In a galaxy of video games, there is only one, Star Wars. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
They got a million toys at Toys R Us that she can play with.
Play Parker Brothers Q*bert on your Atari 2600 for just $34.97. Frogger, $28.97. Popeye, $34.97 at Toys R Us. Also available for Atari 5200, ColecoVision, and Intellivision. Get in on the Parker trade-in rebate. Buy 2 select Parker cartridges, send proof of purchase and any old cartridge, and get $15 back.
You're a kid, right? Wrong! You're a gorilla being chased by wild warriors. You're playing Amidar, the challenging new home video game. You've outsmarted the warriors and won, right? Wrong! Now you're a paint roller being chased by pigs. Amidar is action-packed like the arcade game and lots of fun. You've won, right? Wrong! You're a gorilla again, only now the game's faster. But you're ready for Amidar, right? Right. From Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
They think I'm trapped, but I'll escape.
Tunnel Runner, the new video game where you don't look down on the maze. You're in it.
Monster! He's smart, I gotta outsmart him. Oh, he's fast, I gotta be faster.
Tunnel Runner with RAM Plus to mega-charge your Atari VCS for 3 times the excitement.
Right, left. Better check them out. It's the exit to another maze.
Tunnel Runner from CBS Electronics, where the excitement never ends.
I'm not trapped. I'm not trapped.
Atari would like to thank you for taking us into your homes. We wish you all a happy holiday.
You mean you have an Atari video game system, but not Atari Missile Command?
Well, then you must have Defender. Great game. Or a challenge like Star Raiders. What about Yar's Revenge? Well, you gotta have Berserk, right? And Atari Space Invaders, a classic.
You don't? Come on. An Atari system without those games? That's like having a stereo with no hit records.
The world's greatest arcade video games are now the world's greatest home video games. They're only from Atari, and only for systems from Atari, which means that when you play them on an Atari home video game system, you'll see amazing graphics, like this. Thrilling action, like this. It also means that if you try to play them on anything but an Atari system, you'll see something like this.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me. Uh-oh. George again. Ooh, Atari's ASC battle. It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games. Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
Sorry, only our demonstrators left. Mine! No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
Hey!
Yes?
You look like a real jerk.
Well, I am a corporate executive.
He stops exciting things from happening.
So what you doing?
Well, Muffy, Buffy, Biff Jr. and I are going on our Sunday drive.
Oh, no, you're not. You're gonna play pole position!
World games from Atari, the #1 video computer system with more games than any other.
Everyone's gone Atari, the #1 video game. Did you try Breakout with a moving wall? Did you try Breakout with an extra ball? It's what fun's all about. It's Super Breakout. It's a brand new game from Atari. Have you played Atari today?
If you liked Breakout, you'll love Super Breakout. It's got more color, more sound, and more action. And naturally, it's from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
I've been hearing the so-called sports expert talk about his realistic home video baseball game. Well, I've played real baseball. And I also played the new Atari Real Sports Baseball, and I like it. Because I can sacrifice fly, as well as steal, pick off runners. Hey, it's baseball like baseball should be played. And who are you going to listen to anyhow? That other guy who just talks baseball? Or a nice guy like me who lives it?
New Real Sports Baseball, one in a series only from Atari.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home. So we got an Atari video game. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders. Zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun. But personally, I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
Activision presents the creepiest video game ever seen on the Atari 2600. Spider Fighter by Activision. Use your bug blaster to fight off swarm after swarm of very spooky spiders.
Spiders, silly the spiders, jumping, flying, multiplying. Spiders, silly the spiders, bouncing, punching, watch out, crunching.
Spider Fighter, designed by Larry Miller for Activision.
Berserk, you're on. Hey, where are you going? The video arcade. You can't play Berserk at home. Now you can. Atari.
It's Berserk inside an electric maze where robots shoot with electric rays.
Take that, turkey.
So look out, don't get trapped or you might get zapped. Berserk is here from Atari.
Can you beat that?
And only for systems from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
2 more smash hits from Atari.
The centipedes are coming. Get your fingers moving fast, and the spiders out to get you. Do you think that you can last? The scorpions are dancing, and the fleas are like a jet. If you're looking for some action, centipedes, the game to get.
And get Ms. Pac-Man with 4 screens, floating fruit, even pretzels.
Honey, don't you know I'm more than Pac-Man with a bow?
Centipede and Ms. Pac-Man, only from Atari.
Which of you Magic experts has created the toughest game for Atari's video system?
Demon attack!
Whoa there, Fire Breath.
You not good enough for demon attack! You invincible! I'm winning!
Good work, Voltar. Demon Attack really is tough. Magic's Demon Attack. In television version, coming soon.
Stalked, pursued, chased by a giant squid. You are the dolphin. You must swim, weave, dive to escape. And you must watch the surface for the magic seagull. Then jump, touch the gull, and the power to turn, to chase. The squid is yours. The squid is no more. Another squid takes his place. You are the dolphin. For the Atari 2600, Dolphin. Designed by Matthew Hubbard for Activision.
My whole life has changed since the award-winning Frogger home video game became so popular. Frankly, I'm swamped by admirers, so to get away from it all, I reach for Frogger. It's a challenge, Ribbit, because the better you are, Ribbit, Ribbit, the harder Frogger is to play. Oops.
Ladies first.
Do they love me or my Frogger?
Frogger, Sega's arcade game, now a home video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
Enduro for the Atari
Atari 2600. Can you endure Enduro? Designed by Larry Miller for Activision.
Just last night, I was lost in the jungle with Pitfall Harry, surrounded by giant scorpions and man-eating crocodiles.
Well, Harry and I just grabbed the van, swung through the trees, and over the tar pits and found the jungle treasure. It was really neat.
If you haven't met Pitfall Harry, you're missing the year's most incredible video game adventure. Pitfall for the Atari 2600 and in television.
Since I met Pitfall Harry, no other man will do.
Pitfall, designed by David Crane for Activision.
Atari Pac-Man into your Atari video computer system, and you're playing the hottest games in Space Invaders, Atari Pac-Man.
Hate to eat and run.
Pac-Man by Atari.
My turn.
My toy.
This new Popeye video game has the boys fighting worse than ever. Oh, Popeye. It's my game. It's got 3 screens just like the arcade. Watch out!
Yikes.
Uh-oh. Fight like a man.
Where's me spinach?
Off your choke, you wimp.
I ain't wimpy. I'm much better looking.
The new Popeye video game, available for most popular home video and computer systems.
We can't turn back. Liberate target at 039er.
Under control.
Approaching an airspeed 626.
Taking West Canyon.
Good call. Fuel critical, sir. Choppers at 3 o'clock.
Roger, I copy.
Pilots closing, shall I direct, sir? No, he'll decide that. Fuel critical, sir. He knows that.
Sure, he's opting for the East Canyon.
Negative, that's a trap.
River Raid to home sweet home at Teddy.
River Raid, can you make it? River Raid, can you make it? Do you copy?
It's only a game. River Raid for the Atari video computer system, designed by Carol Shaw for Activision.
I'll blow this town to smithereens! Time bombs! Try to get up there in time, Spider-Man!
Watch me cut my web, Goblin.
Watch yourself fall, Silk Slinger!
Gotta stop the bombs in time.
If I don't get you, webhead, my diagnosis will!
Holy Hannah!
And you're running out of fluid!
Is this more action than even Spider-Man can handle?
Spider-Man, a video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
Star Trek, the game. A game so challenging, you need this combat control panel to play it. Launch photons, fire your phasers, engage warp speed, blast Klingons and alien saucers on your way to the ultimate enemy, Nomad. Is it the most challenging game in the galaxy?
It's inhuman.
Star Trek from Sega. Get a free Star Trek poster when you play Sega's Star Trek at any Musicland store.
The fun is back, as you can see, with the 2600 from Atari. Still under $50, but wait, there's more. There's a stack of new games at your video store. In real sports boxing, the action's rough. If you're gonna make it, you got to be tough. Midnight Magic is an arcade blast. Like a pinball wizard, you got to be fast. Fire Solaris to protect your base, then blast off into hyperspace. The fun is back, oh yes sirree. New 2600 games